Welcome to Sleepy Stories to Relax. Tonight, leave behind the noise of the world. Set aside the tasks of the day. Allow your thoughts to slow down like a gentle stream flowing through a quiet meadow. Tonight, we journey to a hidden valley far beyond the busy roads and crowded cities. A place where flowers bloom in every season, where birds greet the morning sun, and where a gardener spends his days caring for one of the most beautiful gardens in the world. Our story is called The Gardener of the Hidden Valley. So settle into a comfortable position. Take a slow, peaceful breath. And let us begin. Far beyond the hills, hidden between tall mountains, there was a valley that very few people had ever seen. No signs pointed toward it. No maps marked its location. Most travelers passed nearby without realizing it existed at all. Yet those who somehow discovered it never forgot it. The hidden valley was unlike any other place. A clear river wound through its center. Wildflowers covered the hillsides. Ancient trees stood quietly along winding paths. And every morning, sunlight arrived gently, painting the valley in shades of gold and green. At the heart of the valley stood a small stone cottage. Its roof was covered with climbing roses. Its windows overlooked fields of flowers. And beside the cottage stretched a magnificent garden. The garden belonged to a man named Elias. Elias had lived in the valley for as long as anyone could remember. Some believed he had been born there. Others thought he had arrived many years ago and simply never left. No one knew for certain. And Elias never seemed concerned by such questions. His days followed a peaceful rhythm. Every morning, before the sun rose above the mountains, he woke to the sound of birds singing outside his window. He prepared a simple breakfast. A cup of warm tea. Fresh bread. A little honey. Then he stepped outside into the cool morning air. The garden greeted him immediately. Rows of lavender swayed gently in the breeze. White daisies sparkled with morning dew. Roses climbed wooden arches along the pathways. And colorful flowers stretched toward the growing sunlight. Elias loved these early hours. The valley felt especially peaceful then. The river flowed quietly. The birds sang softly, and the world seemed in no hurry at all. He walked slowly through the garden each morning, checking the flowers, removing fallen leaves, watering young plants. Sometimes he paused simply to admire a blossom that had opened overnight. To many people, such work might have seemed ordinary. But to Elias, it never felt ordinary. Every flower told a story. Every season brought change, and every day offered something beautiful to notice. As the first sunlight touched the mountains, the valley began to glow. Golden light spread across the fields. Mist drifted above the river. The garden awakened fully. Elias smiled. Another peaceful day had begun in the hidden valley. And though he did not know it yet, this particular year would bring unexpected visitors, new friendships, and gentle adventures that would make the valley even more special than before. Part 2. The hidden valley welcomed each morning in its own gentle way. Before the sunlight reached the fields, a thin silver mist drifted above the river. Birds perched among the branches of ancient trees. Wildflowers nodded softly in the cool breeze. And as always, Elias stepped outside his stone cottage just as the first light appeared above the mountains. The garden was waiting. It always seemed to be waiting. Not impatiently. Not urgently. Simply ready for another peaceful day. Elias carried a small watering can along one of the winding paths. Lavender lined both sides of the walkway. Its sweet fragrance filled the air. Tiny bees moved lazily from flower to flower. Everything felt calm. Everything felt unhurried. As he reached the far end of the garden, Elias noticed something unusual. Near a patch of white daisies stood a wooden bench. The bench had been there for many years. Visitors sometimes rested there while admiring the flowers. But this morning, something rested upon the seat. A small leather journal. Elias stopped. The journal looked worn from use. Its brown cover showed signs of many journeys. Carefully, he picked it up. There was no name on the cover. No note attached. Only the journal itself. Curious, Elias sat on the bench and opened it. The pages were filled with neat handwriting. Some pages described distant mountains. Others spoke of forests, rivers, and quiet villages. There were sketches too. Simple drawings of places the owner had visited. Elias turned each page slowly. The journal seemed less like a diary and more like a collection of peaceful memories. Then he reached the final written page. A short sentence had been written there. If you find this journal, perhaps you can add a story of your own. Elias smiled. The words felt strangely fitting. He looked around the garden. Morning sunlight now illuminated the flowers. Dew sparkled like tiny diamonds upon the petals. The river flowed quietly in the distance. There was certainly no shortage of stories here. For a while, he sat in silence, listening to birdsong, watching butterflies drift through the garden. Then he reached for a pencil tucked inside the journal. On the next empty page, he began writing. Not a grand adventure. Not an exciting tale. Simply a description of the valley waking up at dawn. The mist above the river. The scent of lavender. The first rays of sunlight touching the mountains. The peaceful rhythm of tending flowers. When he finished, the page felt complete. A small story, yet somehow meaningful. Elias closed the journal and placed it back on the bench. Perhaps its owner would return someday. Or perhaps another traveler would find it. Either way, the story would continue. The thought pleased him. As the morning progressed, more life filled the valley. A family of rabbits appeared near the edge of the garden. Sparrows gathered beside the fountain. A pair of deer moved quietly through the distant meadow. Elias greeted them all as though they were old friends. In many ways, they were. The hidden valley had always felt like a community. Not only for people, but for every living thing that called it home. By midday, the sun stood high above the mountains. Warm light covered the fields. The flowers swayed gently beneath the blue sky. Elias paused beneath the shade of an ancient oak tree. From there, he could see almost the entire valley. The river winding through green meadows. The cottage among the roses. The colorful garden stretching toward the hills. It was a beautiful view. One he had seen countless times. Yet it never felt ordinary. And as a gentle breeze moved through the leaves overhead, Elias felt grateful. Grateful for the valley. Grateful for the garden. And grateful for another peaceful day among the flowers. Part 3. The days that followed were peaceful, much like all the days that came before. Each morning, Elias woke to the songs of birds outside his cottage window. Each morning, the garden greeted him with new colors. And each morning, the hidden valley seemed to reveal another small wonder. One day, a new rose had bloomed beside the stone archway. The next, a family of bluebirds had built a nest among the climbing vines. And on another morning, tiny wildflowers appeared beside a path where none had grown before. Elias enjoyed noticing these small changes. They reminded him that even the quietest places were always growing, always changing, always alive. One bright spring afternoon, after tending the flower beds, Elias decided to follow a path he had not walked in many weeks. The trail wound gently through a grove of ancient trees near the edge of the valley. Their branches stretched high above, creating a cool green canopy. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in soft golden beams. The air smelled of moss, wildflowers, and fresh earth. As Elias walked, he listened to the gentle sounds around him. The rustle of leaves, the distant song of birds, the quiet flow of a stream somewhere beyond the trees. Everything felt calm. Everything felt perfectly at peace. After some time, he arrived at a small clearing. In the center stood an old stone fountain. The fountain had been there for longer than anyone remembered. Clear water trickled gently from its center into a shallow basin. Wildflowers surrounded it on every side. Elias often visited this place. It was one of his favorite corners of the valley. Today, however, something was different. Beside the fountain sat a young fox. Its reddish coat glowed warmly in the afternoon sunlight. The fox appeared completely relaxed. Not frightened, not cautious, simply curious. For a moment, the fox and the gardener looked at one another. Neither moved. Then the fox lowered its head and drank from the fountain. Elias smiled. He quietly sat on a nearby stone and watched. The fox remained for several minutes, occasionally glancing toward him, occasionally watching butterflies drift through the clearing. Eventually, it stood and wandered slowly back into the forest. Its tail disappeared among the trees. And once again, the clearing became still. Elias remained by the fountain a little longer, listening to the water, watching sunlight dance across the surface. The moment reminded him of something he had learned long ago. Nature never hurried, yet everything happened exactly when it should. The flowers bloomed. The leaves changed color. The birds built their nests. The river flowed toward the sea. All without rushing. All without worry. Perhaps people could learn something from that. As the afternoon began to fade, Elias returned to the cottage. Along the way, he gathered a few seeds from wildflowers growing beside the path. He planned to plant them in a new corner of the garden. The valley always seemed eager to share its beauty. Back at home, he carefully prepared a small flower bed near the eastern fence. The soil was rich and soft, perfect for new growth. As he planted the seeds, he wondered what colors the flowers would bring. Blue, yellow, purple, it didn't matter. Part of the joy was waiting to find out. That evening, after a simple supper, Elias sat on the porch overlooking the valley. The sky glowed with shades of gold, pink, and lavender. The river reflected the fading light. Birds settled into their nests. The garden grew quiet. Elias wrapped a blanket around his shoulders and watched the sunset. It was a view he had seen hundreds of times. Perhaps thousands. Yet it never lost its beauty. And as the first stars appeared above the mountains, he felt the same peaceful gratitude he felt every evening. Another day had passed in the hidden valley. A simple day, a quiet day, and a beautiful one. Part 4. Spring slowly settled deeper into the hidden valley. Each morning brought new colors to the garden. The roses climbed higher along their wooden arches. The lavender fields grew fuller. And tiny blossoms appeared in places where only green leaves had been a week before. Elias loved this season. It always felt as though the valley was waking from a long, peaceful dream. One morning, after finishing his usual walk through the garden, he decided to visit a meadow beyond the river. The meadow rested near the foot of the mountains. Wildflowers grew there in great numbers. Many of them could not be found anywhere else in the valley. Elias often collected seeds from the meadow to plant in his garden. The walk itself was pleasant. A narrow stone bridge crossed the river. The water below sparkled beneath the morning sunlight. Dragonflies drifted above the surface. The air carried the scent of fresh grass and blooming flowers. As Elias crossed the bridge, he noticed something unusual. A small wooden sign stood beside the path. He was certain it had not been there before. Curious, he approached. The sign was simple, hand-carved from pale wood. Only a few words had been painted upon it. Take a moment to listen. Elias smiled. It was an unusual message. Yet somehow, it felt perfectly suited to the valley. He sat on a nearby stone and decided to do exactly that. For several minutes, he listened. At first, he heard only the obvious sounds. Birdsong, flowing water, the breeze moving through distant trees. But gradually, he noticed more. The gentle hum of bees among the flowers. The soft rustle of grass. The distant tapping of a woodpecker somewhere within the forest. Even the river seemed to have its own quiet rhythm. The valley was never truly silent. It was simply filled with peaceful sounds. Sounds that often went unnoticed. When Elias finally stood again, he felt oddly refreshed. As though the simple act of listening had slowed the world around him. The rest of the walk passed quietly. The meadow was beautiful as always. Yellow flowers stretched across the hillside. Purple blossoms swayed gently in the breeze. Butterflies drifted lazily from flower to flower. Elias gathered a small pouch of seeds. Then sat beneath a tree to enjoy the view. The mountains rose in the distance. The river wound through the valley below. And beyond it all stood his little stone cottage surrounded by gardens. It looked tiny from here. Yet somehow welcoming. Like a warm light in the middle of a vast landscape. After some time, Elias returned home. The afternoon sunlight bathed the garden in golden warmth. He spent the next few hours planting the new seeds beside the eastern fence. The soil felt cool beneath his hands. Birds hopped nearby, searching for insects. Everything moved at its usual gentle pace. As evening approached, clouds gathered above the mountains. Not storm clouds. Soft gray clouds that promised a light spring rain. The first drops began falling just after sunset. Elias sat beneath the covered porch and watched. Rain tapped gently against the leaves. The garden seemed to welcome it. Flowers bowed beneath tiny droplets. The scent of earth filled the air. The river shimmered beneath the fading light. There was something deeply comforting about spring rain. No rush. No noise. Only a steady rhythm. A reminder that nature knew exactly what it needed. And as darkness slowly settled over the hidden valley, Elias listened to the rain and felt perfectly content. The flowers were growing. The valley was thriving. And tomorrow would bring another peaceful day. Part 5. The gentle rain continued through the night. When morning arrived, the hidden valley looked refreshed. Tiny droplets sparkled on every leaf. The river flowed a little faster. And the flowers seemed brighter than ever beneath the soft sunlight. Elias stepped outside with his usual cup of tea. The air felt cool and clean. He paused for a moment on the cottage porch, breathing in the scent of wet earth and blooming roses. It was one of his favorite smells in the world. After finishing his tea, he began his morning walk through the garden. The pathways glistened with moisture. Bees slowly emerged from their shelters. Birds greeted the new day with cheerful songs. Everything felt calm. Everything felt alive. As he reached the eastern fence, Elias stopped. The seeds he had planted a few days earlier had already begun to sprout. Tiny green shoots pushed through the soil. Small, delicate, full of promise. Elias smiled. Watching a seed become a flower was one of life's quiet miracles. No matter how many times he witnessed it, the feeling never changed. Carefully, he knelt beside the young plants, checking the soil, removing a few fallen leaves, making sure they had enough room to grow. The work was simple, yet deeply satisfying. Later that morning, Elias followed a narrow trail leading toward a hill overlooking the valley. He often visited this hill during spring. From there, he could see almost everything. The winding river, the forests, the meadows, the distant mountains, and of course, the garden surrounding his cottage. The climb was gentle. Wildflowers lined the path. Butterflies drifted lazily through the warm air. A light breeze carried the scent of pine trees from the nearby forest. When he reached the top, Elias sat beneath an old maple tree. The view was magnificent. Golden sunlight spilled across the valley floor. The river sparkled like a silver ribbon. Fields of flowers stretched toward the horizon. For a long time, he simply sat and watched. There was no need to hurry. No task demanding his attention. No destination waiting ahead. Only the present moment. The peaceful beauty of the valley. As the hours passed, clouds drifted slowly overhead. Their shadows moved across the fields below. The scene changed constantly, yet always remained calm. Eventually, Elias opened the small leather journal he had found weeks earlier. It had remained on a shelf inside the cottage ever since. Every now and then, he added a new entry. Today felt like the perfect day to write. He described the rain, the young seedlings, the view from the hill, and the feeling of gratitude that filled his heart whenever he looked across the valley. His handwriting moved slowly across the page. There was no rush, only thoughts becoming words. When he finished, he closed the journal and smiled. The collection of stories was growing. Much like the garden itself. Both were shaped little by little. Day by day. Season by season. As afternoon turned toward evening, Elias returned to the cottage. The sunlight softened. The birds grew quieter. And long shadows stretched across the garden paths. That night, he prepared a simple supper and sat beside the window. Outside, the valley glowed beneath the golden light of sunset. A few deer grazed peacefully in the distant meadow. The river reflected the colors of the sky. And somewhere among the flowers, a gentle breeze whispered through the leaves. Elias watched the scene quietly. Feeling grateful once again. Not for anything extraordinary, but for the ordinary beauty that surrounded him every day. The hidden valley never tried to impress anyone. It simply existed. Growing. Blooming. Changing with the seasons. And perhaps that was what made it so special. Part 6. As spring slowly moved toward summer, the hidden valley became even more colorful. The garden surrounding Elias's cottage seemed to grow a little fuller every day. Roses climbed higher along their wooden arches. Lavender swayed in long purple rows. And the tiny seedlings beside the eastern fence had begun to blossom into delicate flowers of blue and gold. Each morning brought something new. A flower opening for the first time. A butterfly visiting a newly bloomed rose. A bird building a nest among the vines. Elias noticed them all. He had learned long ago that the smallest moments were often the most beautiful. One warm morning, after watering the garden, he decided to follow the river upstream. The path curved gently through meadows and groves of ancient trees. Sunlight danced upon the water. The river moved quietly beside him. Its surface reflected the blue sky above. As Elias walked, he passed many familiar places. A fallen tree where rabbits often rested. A patch of wildflowers filled with butterflies. A large stone where he sometimes sat to watch the clouds. The valley felt like an old friend. Every path held a memory. Every corner carried a story. Eventually, he reached a part of the river he rarely visited. Here, the water widened into a small crystal clear pond. Tall grasses surrounded its edges. White lilies floated peacefully upon the surface. The place felt untouched. Almost hidden. Elias sat beneath a willow tree nearby. The long branches swayed gently in the breeze. For a while, he simply listened. The sound of flowing water. The rustling leaves. The distant call of birds. Everything blended together into a peaceful melody. As he rested, something caught his attention. A small wooden boat floated near the far edge of the pond. It looked old. Perhaps someone had built it years ago. The boat carried no sail. No fishing equipment. Nothing at all. It simply drifted quietly with the current. Elias watched it for a long time. Eventually, the boat disappeared around a bend in the river. And somehow, that simple sight stayed with him. He imagined where it might go. Past the meadows. Through the forests. Toward distant places beyond the mountains. The thought made him smile. The world was much larger than the valley. Yet the valley was enough. It contained everything he needed. Peace, beauty, and time to notice both. Later that afternoon, Elias returned home and spent several hours tending the garden. The warm summer sun filled the air with the scent of flowers. Bees moved busily from blossom to blossom. Butterflies drifted above the pathways. The garden seemed alive with quiet activity. As evening approached, Elias sat beside the fountain near the center of the garden. This had become one of his favorite places. The water sparkled beneath the fading sunlight. Birds gathered nearby before returning to their nests. The sky slowly shifted from blue to gold. Then from gold to soft shades of pink and lavender. It was the kind of evening that encouraged reflection. The kind that made the world feel slower. Gentler. Elias opened the leather journal once again. This time, he wrote about the little wooden boat. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it had reminded him of something important. Not every journey needed a destination. Sometimes it was enough simply to drift peacefully with the current. Just as the river flowed without hurry. Just as the seasons arrived in their own time. Just as the flowers bloomed when they were ready. When he finished writing, the last light of day rested upon the valley. The mountains glowed softly in the distance. The river reflected the colors of sunset. And the hidden valley settled quietly into another peaceful evening. Part 7. Summer arrived gently in the hidden valley. The days grew longer. The mornings became warmer. Every pathway was lined with color. Red roses climbed over wooden arches. Lavender swayed in the breeze like purple waves. Golden sunflowers turned their faces toward the morning light. And wildflowers painted the hillsides in countless shades of blue, yellow, pink, and white. The valley seemed to glow beneath the summer sun. Each day began with the familiar rhythm Elias loved. A quiet breakfast on the porch. A walk through the garden. A greeting to the birds and butterflies that visited each morning. And then hours spent caring for flowers, trimming vines, and tending the soil. The work was never hurried. The garden had taught him patience. Flowers could not be rushed. Seeds bloomed when they were ready. The seasons arrived in their own time. Nature moved gently. And Elias had learned to do the same. One particularly warm afternoon, he decided to visit a meadow beyond the western hills. The walk was longer than most of his usual journeys. But the path was beautiful. Tall grasses swayed softly in the wind. Butterflies floated through the air. Wildflowers lined the trail. The sky above was clear and bright. As he walked, Elias noticed how different the valley looked during summer. The river shimmered beneath the sunlight. The forests appeared deeper and greener. Even the mountains seemed softer beneath the warm blue sky. After some time, he reached the meadow. It stretched across the hillside like a sea of golden grass. Small flowers dotted the landscape. Bees moved lazily between blossoms. The air hummed with quiet life. Near the center of the meadow stood a large oak tree. Its branches spread wide, creating a pool of shade beneath the summer sun. Elias settled beneath the tree and rested. From there, He could see almost the entire valley below. His cottage looked tiny among the gardens. The river wound through the landscape like a silver ribbon. The distant forests rested peacefully against the mountains. Everything seemed calm. Everything seemed perfectly balanced. As he sat there, a gentle breeze moved through the grass. Clouds drifted slowly overhead. The world felt wonderfully still. Not silent, but peaceful. The kind of peace that comes when nothing needs to happen. For a while, Elias simply watched the clouds. Some resembled ships. Others looked like castles. One even reminded him of a giant flower floating across the sky. The simple act of watching made him smile. When he was younger, he often believed happiness came from doing more. Traveling farther. Achieving bigger goals. Accomplishing greater things. But the valley had taught him something different. Sometimes happiness came from sitting beneath a tree, listening to birds, watching clouds, feeling the warmth of sunlight upon the grass. Simple moments. Quiet moments. Moments that many people overlooked. Yet those moments often became the most memorable. As afternoon slowly faded toward evening, Elias began his journey home. The golden light of late summer stretched across the valley. Long shadows crossed the meadows. Birds drifted toward their nests. The river reflected the colors of the setting sun. Back at the cottage, he spent the evening watering the garden. The flowers seemed especially beautiful in the soft evening light. Drops of water sparkled upon their petals. The scent of roses filled the air. And somewhere nearby, a nightingale began to sing. Elias paused for a moment. Listening. Smiling. The hidden valley had given him another perfect day. Not because anything extraordinary had happened, but because ordinary moments, when noticed carefully, could become extraordinary all on their own. As darkness slowly settled over the valley, the garden grew quiet. The stars appeared one by one above the mountains. And the peaceful rhythm of summer continued beneath the endless sky. Part 8. Summer settled comfortably over the hidden valley. The days moved slowly, carried along by sunshine, birdsong, and the gentle flow of the river. Each morning, Elias awoke to the golden light filtering through the roses that climbed around his cottage windows. The garden was now at its fullest. Flowers bloomed in every direction. Lavender swayed like waves of purple silk. Roses filled the air with their sweet fragrance. Sunflowers stood tall beneath the blue sky. And butterflies drifted lazily among the blossoms. To many people, the garden might have seemed complete. But Elias knew gardens were never truly finished. There was always something new to plant. Something new to learn. Something new to appreciate. One quiet morning, while walking along a shaded path near the edge of the valley, he noticed a narrow trail hidden behind a curtain of ivy. He paused. The trail looked familiar, as though he had seen it many years ago. Yet he could not remember the last time he had followed it. Curious, Elias stepped through the ivy and continued along the forgotten path. The trail wound gently between ancient trees. Sunlight filtered through the leaves overhead. Birdsong echoed softly through the forest. The air felt cooler here. Still and peaceful. After a short walk, the trees opened into a small hidden clearing. In the center stood a stone circle covered with moss. Wildflowers grew between the stones. A tiny stream flowed nearby. The entire place felt untouched by time. Elias smiled. He remembered it now. Many years ago, when he was younger, he had often visited this clearing. He would sit among the stones and read books or simply listen to the sounds of nature. Life had been quieter then. Or perhaps he had simply been better at noticing quiet things. He sat upon one of the moss-covered stones and listened. The stream trickled gently over smooth rocks. Leaves rustled softly overhead. A bird called somewhere in the distance. The sounds blended together into a peaceful rhythm. For a long time, Elias remained there. Not thinking about tomorrow. Not worrying about the future. Simply enjoying the present moment. Eventually, his gaze drifted toward the small stream. Sunlight sparkled across the water. Tiny fish moved beneath the surface. The scene reminded him of something important. Nature never tried to be extraordinary. The stream did not rush to become a river. The flowers did not compete to bloom first. The trees did not worry about growing taller than the mountains. Everything simply became what it was meant to become. Patiently. Naturally. And perhaps people could do the same. As afternoon arrived, Elias returned to the garden. The flowers welcomed him with their familiar colors. Bees hummed among the blossoms. The fountain sparkled beneath the sunlight. Everything felt exactly as it should. That evening, after finishing his work, Elias opened the leather journal once more. He wrote about the hidden clearing, the moss-covered stones, the peaceful stream, and the lesson the valley continued teaching him year after year. That beauty often hides in quiet places. That happiness often arrives unnoticed. And that a peaceful life is built from many small moments rather than a few grand ones. When he finished writing, the sun was setting beyond the mountains. Golden light spread across the valley. The river reflected the colors of the sky. The garden glowed softly in the evening warmth. Elias closed the journal and sat on the porch. The world seemed wonderfully calm. And as the first stars appeared above the hidden valley, he felt grateful for another beautiful day among the flowers. Part 9. As summer slowly began to fade, the hidden valley prepared for a new season. The days remained warm. The flowers still bloomed. The river continued its peaceful journey through the meadows. Yet subtle changes were beginning to appear. The sunlight seemed softer. The evenings arrived a little earlier. And now and then, a golden leaf drifted quietly from the trees. Elias noticed these small signs immediately. The valley always spoke softly when the seasons changed. One only needed to pay attention. Each morning, he continued his familiar routine. Tea on the porch, a walk through the garden, a moment beside the fountain, and a quiet greeting to the birds that visited the flowers. But lately, he found himself spending more time simply observing. Watching the way sunlight moved across the valley. Listening to the changing songs of birds. Noticing the first hints of autumn hidden among the leaves. One afternoon, Elias decided to visit the highest hill overlooking the valley. The path wound gently through wildflower meadows and clusters of ancient trees. It was a place he visited only a few times each year. The view from the summit was unlike any other. As he climbed, a cool breeze accompanied him. The air carried the scent of grass and pine. Clouds drifted lazily across the sky. Everything felt peaceful. When he reached the top, he settled beneath a familiar stone outcrop and looked out across the valley. The sight took his breath away. The river shimmered like silver. The forest stretched endlessly toward the mountains. His cottage rested among colorful gardens far below. And beyond it all, the landscape rolled gently toward the horizon. Elias smiled. No matter how many times he saw this view, it always felt special. For a long while, he simply sat and watched. The clouds moved slowly. Birds glided upon warm currents of air. The valley seemed to breathe quietly beneath the afternoon sun. As he rested, he remembered something his grandfather had once told him many years ago. A garden teaches the same lesson as life. At the time, Elias had not fully understood. But now he did. Flowers bloom. Flowers fade. Seasons arrive. Seasons pass. Nothing remains exactly the same. And that is what makes each moment precious. The thought filled him with a quiet sense of peace. There was beauty in change, beauty in growth, beauty even in endings. Because every ending made room for something new. As the afternoon slowly slipped toward evening, Elias opened the leather journal. The pages were nearly full now. Many months of observations filled its chapters. Descriptions of flowers, sunrises, rainfall, birdsong, small moments that others might overlook. Yet to Elias, they were treasures. Today he wrote about the hill, the view, and the gentle arrival of autumn. When he finished, he turned the pages one last time. The journal had become a reflection of the valley itself. Quiet, simple, beautiful, a collection of moments carefully noticed. As the sun began its descent, golden light spread across the landscape. Long shadows stretched through the meadows. The river reflected orange and pink colors from the sky. Everything glowed softly beneath the evening light. Elias remained there until the first stars appeared. Then he slowly made his way home. The garden welcomed him as always. The roses swayed gently in the breeze. The fountain whispered quietly in the fading light. And the cottage windows glowed warmly against the approaching night. Another peaceful day had come to an end. Another beautiful page had been added to the story of the hidden valley. And somewhere beyond the mountains, autumn was drawing closer with every passing breeze. Part 10. Autumn arrived quietly in the hidden valley. There was no sudden change. No dramatic moment. Only small signs that appeared day by day. The mornings became cooler. The sunlight softened. And the leaves slowly transformed from green into shades of gold, amber, and crimson. The valley seemed to glow beneath these new colors. Elias loved autumn. There was a calmness to it. A feeling that nature was slowing down after the busy months of summer. The garden changed as well. Some flowers had completed their season. Others bloomed for the very first time. Chrysanthemums brightened the pathways. Late roses continued to flourish beneath the gentle sunlight. And the lavender fields swayed beneath cool autumn breezes. One crisp morning, Elias awoke earlier than usual. A thin mist covered the valley. The river looked like a silver ribbon winding through a dream. The mountains stood quietly beyond the fog. Everything felt peaceful. He wrapped a warm shawl around his shoulders and stepped outside. The garden was silent except for the occasional song of a bird greeting the morning. Tiny droplets of dew rested upon every leaf. The flowers sparkled as the first rays of sunlight touched them. For a moment, Elias simply stood there, breathing in the cool air, enjoying the stillness. Autumn had a special kind of beauty. A quieter beauty. One that encouraged people to slow down and notice things. Later that morning, he gathered a basket and set off toward the orchard on the far side of the valley. The orchard was one of his favorite places during autumn. Old apple trees stretched across gentle hillsides. Their branches were heavy with fruit. The walk there was pleasant. Golden leaves drifted through the air. The river flowed peacefully beside the trail. And the crisp breeze carried the scent of pine and earth. When Elias arrived, he found the orchard glowing beneath the morning sunlight. Red apples hung from the branches. Yellow leaves shimmered in the breeze. The entire hillside seemed painted in warm autumn colors. He spent the next hour collecting apples. Not rushing. Simply enjoying the task. The basket slowly filled, one apple at a time. As he worked, birds moved among the trees. Squirrels gathered acorns nearby. The valley carried on with its gentle rhythm. By midday, Elias sat beneath an apple tree to rest. The basket beside him was nearly full. Sunlight filtered through the branches overhead. The leaves rustled softly in the breeze. He took a bite from a freshly picked apple. Sweet. Crisp. Perfect. Moments like this reminded him why he loved the valley so much. Life here was simple, but simplicity often held its own kind of richness. The afternoon passed peacefully. When Elias finally returned to the cottage, the garden welcomed him with familiar colors and scents. He spent the evening making warm apple preserves. The cottage filled with comforting aromas. Cinnamon, honey, fresh fruit. Outside, autumn settled gently over the valley. The sun lowered behind the mountains. Golden light stretched across the fields. The river reflected the colors of the evening sky. After supper, Elias sat beside the window with the leather journal resting on his lap. He wrote about the orchard, the apples, the drifting leaves, and the quiet joy of a simple autumn day. His handwriting moved slowly across the page. The journal was almost completely full now. Yet there always seemed to be another story waiting to be written. Another beautiful moment waiting to be noticed. When he finished, darkness had settled over the valley. Stars appeared above the mountains. The garden grew still, and a peaceful silence filled the night. Elias smiled. Autumn had arrived, and with it came a new chapter for the Hidden Valley. Part 11. Autumn settled fully over the Hidden Valley. The hills shimmered with gold and amber. The forests wore coats of crimson and orange. And every morning, the valley awakened beneath a blanket of cool, silver mist. Elias welcomed the season as he always did. Slowly, patiently, with gratitude. The garden had become quieter now. Many flowers had completed their season and returned to the earth. Yet beauty remained everywhere. Chrysanthemums brightened the pathways. Late roses continued to bloom. And colorful leaves drifted gently through the air like tiny golden boats. One calm morning, Elias carried a wooden rake into the garden. A thick carpet of leaves covered many of the paths. He began gathering them into neat piles. The work was simple, the kind of task that allowed thoughts to wander peacefully. As he worked, he listened to the familiar sounds around him. The rustle of leaves, the distant river, the soft calls of birds preparing for winter. Everything felt calm. The valley seemed to be breathing more slowly now, preparing for its season of rest. Later that afternoon, Elias walked toward the northern woods. This part of the valley was especially beautiful during autumn. The forest floor glowed with shades of gold and copper. Sunlight filtered through the branches above, creating patterns of light and shadow. Every step felt like walking through a painting. Eventually, he arrived at a small wooden bench overlooking a quiet pond. The pond was hidden among the trees. Few people ever visited it. Elias had discovered it many years ago and often came here when he wanted to think. Today, the water reflected the colors of autumn perfectly. Golden leaves floated upon the surface. Clouds drifted across the reflection. The entire pond seemed filled with light. Elias sat quietly, watching, listening. The world felt wonderfully still. After a while, he noticed something near the edge of the water. A single maple leaf floated slowly across the pond. It moved without hurry, carried gently by the breeze. Elias followed its journey with his eyes. Across the water, past clusters of reeds, toward the opposite shore. The sight reminded him of the small wooden boat he had once seen drifting along the river. Nature often repeated its lessons in different forms. The leaf wasn't trying to reach a destination. It simply moved with the flow of the moment. The same was true of the river, the seasons, the clouds, and perhaps life itself. The thought brought a quiet smile to his face. As the afternoon faded, sunlight grew softer. Long shadows stretched across the forest floor. Birds began returning to their nests. The pond grew still. Reluctantly, Elias stood and began the walk home. The forest glowed warmly around him. Leaves crunched softly beneath his boots. The air smelled of pine and earth. When he reached the garden, dusk had already begun to settle over the valley. The cottage windows shone with welcoming light. A thin curl of smoke rose from the chimney. Everything felt peaceful. Everything felt familiar. That evening, after enjoying a warm supper, Elias opened the nearly full leather journal. Carefully, he wrote about the pond, the floating maple leaf, and the quiet lessons hidden within ordinary moments. His handwriting filled another page. Only a few blank pages remained now. Yet somehow, he wasn't concerned. The valley would always provide new stories, new memories, new seasons. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees. The stars appeared one by one above the mountains. And the hidden valley settled peacefully into another autumn night. Elias closed the journal and smiled. The year was slowly moving toward winter. But there was still much beauty left to enjoy. Part 12. The days continued to grow shorter in the hidden valley. Morning arrived a little later. Evening settled a little earlier. And with each passing week, the air carried a hint of winter. The mountains surrounding the valley now wore thin crowns of snow. The sight always fascinated Elias. Every year, the first snow appeared high above the valley long before it reached the meadows below. It was nature's gentle way of announcing the arrival of a new season. One quiet morning, Elias stepped outside just after sunrise. The garden was covered in silver frost. Every leaf sparkled. Every flower glistened. The pathways looked as though they had been dusted with tiny crystals. The entire valley seemed transformed. For several moments, he simply stood and admired the scene. The beauty of frost was different from the beauty of flowers. More delicate. More temporary. A reminder that some things were beautiful precisely because they did not last. The cool air filled his lungs. The garden rested quietly around him. Many plants had already begun their winter sleep. Yet life remained present everywhere. Birds still visited the feeders near the cottage. Evergreen trees remained vibrant and green. And the river continued its endless journey through the valley. Later that day, Elias carried a basket of seeds into the garden shed. Each autumn, he carefully stored seeds collected throughout the year. Lavender, sunflowers, wildflowers, roses. The small paper packets filled several wooden shelves. Looking at them always filled him with hope. Within each tiny seed rested the promise of spring. Months would pass before they bloomed. Yet their future beauty already existed. Hidden. Waiting patiently. Much like the valley itself during winter. As afternoon arrived, clouds drifted across the sky. The sunlight softened. A cool breeze moved through the trees. Elias wrapped a warm coat around his shoulders and followed a familiar trail toward the river. The landscape looked different now. The bright colors of autumn had begun to fade. Golden leaves covered the ground. Bare branches stretched toward the sky. The river flowed quietly between its banks. Everything seemed calmer. Slower. The valley was preparing to rest. When he reached the river, Elias sat upon a smooth stone overlooking the water. This had become one of his favorite places over the years. The sound of flowing water never changed. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. The river remained constant. Its gentle voice accompanied every season. For a long time, he sat there listening. The world felt wonderfully still. No hurry. No noise. Only the quiet movement of water and wind. As the afternoon faded, tiny snowflakes began drifting from the clouds above. Only a few at first. Small and light. Barely noticeable. Elias smiled. The season's first snowfall. The flakes landed softly upon the river. Upon the grass. upon his coat, each one unique, each one fleeting. For several minutes, he watched them fall. The valley seemed to grow even quieter, as though nature itself were whispering. Eventually, the snowfall stopped. The clouds drifted away, and the last golden light of day appeared beneath the horizon. Elias returned home as evening settled over the hidden valley. Warm light glowed from the cottage windows. The scent of tea filled the air. The garden rested peacefully outside. And for the first time that year, winter no longer felt far away. After supper, Elias opened the leather journal once more. Only a few blank pages remained. Carefully, he wrote about the frost-covered garden, the mountain snow, the tiny seeds waiting for spring, and the first snowflakes of the season. When he finished, he closed the journal gently. The year was nearing its end. Yet the valley's story continued. As it always would. Season after season. Year after year. Under the endless sky of the hidden valley. Part 13. Winter arrived softly in the hidden valley. One morning, Elias opened the cottage door and found the valley covered in a thin blanket of snow. The meadows were white. The rooftops were white. The garden paths wore delicate ribbons of snow that curved gently between the flower beds. Everything looked peaceful. Everything looked still. The familiar colors of spring and summer had disappeared for now. Yet winter brought a beauty of its own. A quieter beauty. A calmer beauty. The kind that invited people to slow down and rest. Elias stepped outside carefully. The snow crunched softly beneath his boots. His breath drifted through the cold morning air. The mountains surrounding the valley sparkled beneath the rising sun. Golden light touched their snowy peaks. The scene felt almost magical. For a while, he simply stood and admired it. The hidden valley had changed once again. And as always, the change felt natural. The garden now slept beneath its blanket of snow. The roses rested. The lavender fields rested. The wildflowers rested. Everything seemed peaceful. Yet Elias knew life remained hidden beneath the surface. Roots waited patiently beneath the earth. Seeds waited quietly in the garden shed. And somewhere deep within every sleeping plant, spring was already preparing its return. The thought comforted him. Winter was never an ending. It was simply part of the cycle. A season of rest before renewal. Later that morning, Elias lit a fire in the cottage fireplace. Warm orange light danced across the stone walls. The room filled with gentle warmth. Outside, snowflakes continued drifting from the sky. Inside, everything felt cozy and calm. He prepared a pot of tea and settled beside the window. This became one of his favorite winter traditions. Sitting quietly, watching the snowfall, listening to the crackling fire. There was no need to hurry anywhere. No need to accomplish anything. The valley itself seemed to encourage stillness. As the afternoon passed, birds gathered near the feeders outside the cottage. Small sparrows, a pair of robins, even a bright red cardinal appeared briefly among the snow-covered branches. Elias enjoyed watching them. Their visits brought life and movement to the peaceful winter landscape. Occasionally, he added a few extra seeds to the feeders. The birds always seemed grateful. By evening, the snowfall had stopped. The sky cleared, and countless stars appeared above the valley. The snow reflected their light, making the landscape glow softly beneath the night sky. After supper, Elias stepped outside one final time. The cold air felt crisp and refreshing. The valley was silent. Not empty. Not lonely. Simply peaceful. The river still flowed beneath the winter sky. The trees stood quietly beneath the stars. The mountains watched over everything as they always had. Elias took a slow breath. The year had changed many times. Spring flowers. Summer sunshine. Autumn leaves. Winter snow. Each season had brought its own beauty. Each season had shared its own lessons. And through it all, the hidden valley had remained a place of peace. A place where life moved gently. A place where beauty could be found in the smallest moments. Eventually, he returned inside. The fire still glowed warmly. The cottage felt welcoming, comfortable, home. Before going to bed, Elias opened the leather journal. Only 2 blank pages remained. He wrote about the first true snowfall, the birds outside the window, the quiet beauty of winter evenings. Then he closed the journal and placed it carefully upon the shelf. Soon its pages would be full. But the story of the valley would continue. Just as it always had. And just as it always would. Outside, snow rested peacefully upon the sleeping garden. Inside, the fire crackled softly. And the hidden valley drifted into another calm winter night. Part 14. Winter settled deeply over the hidden valley. Snow rested upon the meadows like a soft white blanket. The river still flowed through the center of the valley, though its banks were edged with frost. The trees stood quietly beneath the pale winter sky. And every morning, the mountains sparkled in the sunlight. The world seemed slower now. Gentler. Almost as though time itself had decided to rest for a while. Elias welcomed these quiet days. There was less work to do in the garden during winter. The flowers slept beneath the snow. The soil rested. The seeds waited patiently for spring. Yet Elias never felt bored. Winter offered its own kind of beauty. Its own kind of peace. Each morning, he lit a fire in the cottage fireplace. The warm glow filled the room. A kettle gently steamed upon the stove. And outside the window, snowflakes occasionally drifted through the air. One particularly calm afternoon, Elias climbed into the attic above the cottage. It had been many years since he had spent much time there. The attic was filled with old wooden boxes and shelves. Dusty lanterns rested in corners. Bundles of dried flowers hung from the beams. And beneath a small window overlooking the valley stood an old wooden chest. Curious, Elias opened it. Inside were memories, photographs, letters, pressed flowers, small keepsakes collected over many years. Each item seemed to hold a story he had almost forgotten. He spent the afternoon carefully exploring the contents. One photograph showed the garden many years earlier. The flowers were smaller then. The trees younger. Another showed Elias standing beside the fountain as a young man. He smiled when he saw it. Time had passed quietly. Just as the seasons passed. One year becoming another. One season becoming the next. Yet somehow, the valley still felt the same. Peaceful. Welcoming. Home. Among the keepsakes, Elias found an old notebook. Its pages were worn and faded. When he opened it, he discovered notes written by his grandfather. The very man who had first taught him how to care for flowers. The handwriting was familiar. The words simple, yet meaningful. One sentence caught his attention. A gardener does not create beauty alone. He simply helps it grow. Elias read the sentence twice. Then smiled. His grandfather had always understood the valley. Flowers bloomed because of sunlight, rain, soil, time. The gardener's role was simply to help, to care, to notice. The lesson felt as true now as it had many years ago. As evening approached, Elias carried the old notebook downstairs. He sat beside the fire. The leather journal rested nearby. Only a single blank page remained. Outside, snow fell gently beneath the fading light. Inside, warmth filled the cottage. The fire crackled softly. The kettle sang quietly on the stove. Everything felt calm. Everything felt complete. Elias opened the leather journal and reread many of its pages. The sunrise over the river. The hidden clearing. The drifting boat. The autumn orchard. The first snowfall. A year of simple moments. A year of quiet beauty. The journal had captured them all. Not because they were extraordinary, but because they were noticed. And perhaps that was enough. Perhaps that was the secret the hidden valley had been teaching all along. The most beautiful parts of life were often the ones people rushed past. The sound of birds at dawn. The scent of flowers after rain. The warmth of tea on a winter evening. A peaceful walk beneath the trees. Simple things. Gentle things. Yet precious all the same. Outside, darkness slowly settled across the valley. The snow continued falling. The mountains disappeared beneath the evening sky. And the hidden valley rested peacefully beneath another winter night. Only one blank page remained in the journal now. And with it, one final chapter still waiting to be written. Final chapter. Winter continued quietly in the hidden valley. Snow rested gently upon the sleeping gardens. The river flowed steadily through the valley, reflecting the pale light of the winter sky. The fire crackled softly. A kettle rested upon the stove. The leather journal rested on the table before him. Only one page remained blank. One final page. One final story. For several moments, he simply looked out the window. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the air. A few birds visited the feeders near the garden gate. The ancient trees stood quietly beneath their coats of snow. Everything felt calm. Everything felt exactly as it should. The valley had carried him through another year. Through spring flowers, summer sunshine, autumn leaves, and winter snow. Each season had offered its own gifts. Each season had shared its own lessons. Slowly, he opened the journal. His pen rested upon the final blank page. For a moment, he wondered what he should write. There had been so many beautiful memories. So many peaceful mornings. So many quiet evenings. How could one page possibly hold them all? Then he smiled. Perhaps it didn't need to. Carefully, he began writing. Yet somehow, it felt complete. Elias nodded quietly. The words felt true. Not only for the valley, but for life itself. He closed the journal gently. Its pages were now full. The story of the year had been written. Yet he knew the story of the valley was far from over. Tomorrow the river would continue flowing. Snow would continue falling. Birds would continue singing when spring returned. And flowers would bloom once again. The cycle would continue. As it always had. As it always would. That evening, Elias carried the journal to a wooden shelf beside the fireplace. There, it joined several other journals from years gone by. Together they formed a quiet collection of memories. A library of seasons. A record of simple days and peaceful moments. The fire glowed warmly nearby. Outside, the first stars appeared above the mountains. The valley shimmered beneath the moonlight. For a while, Elias sat quietly in his favorite chair. Listening. The crackle of the fire. The whisper of the wind beyond the window. The distant sound of the river moving through the darkness. These sounds had accompanied him for many years. They felt comforting. Familiar. Like old friends. Gradually, the evening grew later. The fire burned lower. The cottage became even quieter. And beyond the window, the hidden valley slept peacefully beneath its blanket of snow. Elias stood and placed another log upon the fire. Then he looked out across the valley one final time before bed. The mountains glowed softly beneath the moonlight. The trees stood silent beneath the stars. The river reflected tiny points of silver light. The entire valley seemed wrapped in a dream. A peaceful dream. A timeless dream. A dream that would continue long after the night had passed. Elias smiled. Then he whispered a quiet goodnight to the valley, to the garden, to the river, to the mountains, and to all the seasons that had shared their beauty throughout the year. The fire crackled softly. The wind sighed gently beyond the cottage walls. And somewhere beneath the snow, countless seeds rested patiently, waiting for spring. Waiting for another beginning. Waiting for another story. The hidden valley grew still. The stars drifted silently overhead. The river continued its endless journey. And the gardener, content and at peace, settled into sleep. As the night deepened, the valley remained calm and quiet beneath the winter sky. And far beyond the mountains, a new dawn was already preparing to arrive. A new season. A new chapter. A new story. But for now, everything was peaceful. Everything was still. And all was well. The end. Sleep peacefully, and may your dreams be as gentle as the hidden valley.
Good evening. Tonight, there is nothing you need to finish, nothing you need to solve, and nowhere you need to be. For the next little while, the world can wait, so make yourself comfortable. Allow your shoulders to relax. Let your breathing become slow and gentle. Perhaps you're already lying beneath a warm blanket. Perhaps the room around you has grown quiet. Maybe the only sound you can hear is the gentle hum of the night. If that's true, then you've arrived at exactly the right place. Welcome to Sleepy Stories to Relax. Here, every story is created to help you leave the busy world behind, to slow your thoughts, to calm your mind, and to gently drift into a peaceful night's sleep. So, if you find yourself falling asleep before the story ends, please know that is exactly what this story was made for. And now, tonight, we're going somewhere very few people have ever found. Far beyond the crowded cities, beyond the winding roads, beyond the hills where morning mist lingers, there is a place hidden from the world. A place that never appears on any map. A place where time seems to move just a little more slowly. It is known only by a quiet name. The Secret Garden. No one can remember exactly when it was first planted. Some believe it has existed for hundreds of years. Others whisper that it has always been there, waiting patiently for someone kind enough to notice it. Its winding stone paths disappear beneath thousands of blooming flowers. Old climbing roses cover weathered walls. Lavender sways gently in the breeze. Tiny white daisies smile beneath the morning sun. Butterflies drift lazily from blossom to blossom. And somewhere nearby, a crystal clear stream sings its quiet song as it flows between smooth stones. Everything here feels peaceful. Everything here feels safe. Nothing grows in a hurry. Nothing fades too quickly. Every flower seems to bloom at exactly the right moment. Every bird sings as though the morning itself were listening. And at the very heart of this beautiful place lives a quiet old gardener. His name is Oliver. His hair has turned silver over the years. His hands carry the gentle marks of a lifetime spent caring for flowers. His smile is warm. His voice is soft. And although very few people have ever met him, the garden seems to know him well. Every morning, before the sun rises above the distant hills, Oliver begins another peaceful day. Not because he must, but because tending the garden has become part of who he is. And tonight, as the stars slowly fade, and the first golden light begins to touch the quiet valley, we will walk beside him, step by gentle step, through winding paths, blooming flowers, quiet mornings, and peaceful seasons, without rushing, without worry, only calm moments, waiting to be discovered. So, take one more slow, comfortable breath, and let us quietly open the old wooden gate that leads into the secret garden. The old wooden gate opened without a sound. It had stood there for longer than anyone could remember. Its weathered oak was wrapped in climbing roses. Soft green ivy reached gently across its iron hinges. As you stepped through the gate, the world outside quietly disappeared. The air felt different here. Cooler, fresher, filled with the gentle fragrance of lavender, jasmine, and fresh earth after the night's dew. Morning had only just begun. The eastern sky glowed with soft shades of gold and pale blue. Tiny drops of dew rested upon every leaf, every flower, every blade of grass, as though the garden had been decorated with thousands of tiny diamonds. Not far away, a robin welcomed the new day with a cheerful melody. Another answered from an old apple tree. Soon, the peaceful chorus of birds filled the garden. Never loud, never hurried, simply part of another beautiful morning. At the center of the garden stood a small stone cottage. Its walls were covered with climbing roses that bloomed almost all year round. White curtains moved gently behind the windows. Smoke drifted lazily from the chimney. Someone was already awake. Inside, Oliver carefully placed a small kettle over the fire. He always began his mornings the same way. A cup of warm herbal tea. A few quiet moments beside the window. And a gentle smile as he watched the sunrise touch the garden. There was something comforting about familiar routines. They reminded him that life did not need to be rushed. Outside, the flowers were already waiting. Not because flowers could speak, but because Oliver had cared for them for so many years, that it almost felt as though they recognized him. He wrapped a light brown gardening coat around his shoulders, picked up his old straw hat, and quietly stepped outside. The cool morning air greeted him like an old friend. He closed his eyes for just a moment, listening. The soft breeze through the trees, the distant song of the stream, the fluttering wings of butterflies waking among the blossoms. These sounds were never exactly the same. Yet somehow, they always felt familiar. Oliver walked slowly along the winding stone path. He never hurried through the garden. Every few steps, he paused, sometimes to admire a newly opened flower, sometimes to straighten a climbing vine, sometimes simply to enjoy the peaceful silence. The garden had taught him something long ago. Nature never rushed. The seasons never hurried. Yet somehow, everything always arrived at exactly the right time. As the sunlight grew warmer, golden rays filtered through the branches of old cherry trees. They painted moving patterns across the pathways below. Tiny butterflies floated through the beams of light. Bees hummed quietly among the lavender fields. The entire garden seemed to awaken together. Oliver reached the oldest rose bush in the garden. It had been planted many generations before his own. Its branches twisted gently around a weathered wooden arch. Thousands of pale cream roses covered every vine. He touched one blossom carefully. Its petals were impossibly soft. A single drop of dew rolled gently from its edge, falling silently onto the rich soil below. Oliver smiled. Every morning, The garden offered something new. Not something grand. Not something extraordinary. Just another quiet little miracle. And perhaps, those small miracles were the most beautiful of all. He continued walking deeper into the secret garden, following a narrow path lined with lavender, toward a place very few people had ever seen. A place hidden beneath the shade of ancient trees. A place where, it was said, the very first flower of the garden had once bloomed. But that quiet discovery would have to wait until the morning had fully awakened. The morning sun climbed a little higher into the clear blue sky. Its warm golden light spread gently across the secret garden. The last traces of mist slowly disappeared. Every flower seemed to welcome the new day. Oliver walked slowly along the winding stone path. He never hurried. The garden had taught him that beautiful things always took their time. On either side of the path, hundreds of roses bloomed in quiet harmony. Soft white, gentle pink, deep crimson. Their sweet fragrance drifted through the cool morning air. Oliver paused beside the first rose bush. A single flower had begun to lean beneath its own weight. Very carefully, he tied the delicate stem to a small wooden support. Not too tightly, just enough to help it stand tall again. "There you are," he whispered softly. "Much better." A gentle breeze passed through the garden. The roses swayed together, almost as if they were thanking him. Nearby, honeybees drifted lazily from blossom to blossom. They worked quietly, never rushing, never wasting a single moment. Oliver loved watching them. To him, they were tiny gardeners too, each one helping the flowers bloom season after season. As he continued walking, the stone path curved beneath an old archway covered in climbing roses. Their branches stretched gracefully overhead, creating a living tunnel of flowers. Sunlight filtered through the petals. Tiny patches of golden light danced across the path below. Oliver always slowed his steps here. It had become one of his favorite places in the entire garden. Beyond the archway stood a small wooden bench. Its surface had grown smooth after many years of quiet mornings. He sat down for a little while. Not because he was tired, but because sitting quietly had become part of his work. From the bench, he could hear the gentle sound of the nearby stream. Birds sang from the branches above. Leaves whispered softly in the breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a wind chime hanging beside the cottage gave a single peaceful note. The sounds blended together like gentle music. No orchestra, no grand performance, only nature, playing its timeless melody. Oliver closed his eyes for a moment. He listened, not just with his ears, but with his whole heart. Every morning, the garden sounded a little different. Some days the birds sang louder. Some days the breeze carried the scent of lavender. Some mornings, only silence filled the air. And somehow, silence was just as beautiful. After a few peaceful minutes, Oliver opened his eyes again. A small orange butterfly had landed on the back of the bench beside him. Its wings opened slowly, then closed again. It stayed there without fear, as though it had known Oliver for years. He smiled but remained perfectly still. The butterfly rested for another quiet moment, before lifting gently into the sunlight. Watching it disappear among the flowers, Oliver remembered something his grandfather had once told him. If you move through a garden with kindness, Even the smallest creatures will trust you. Those words had stayed with him all his life. Perhaps that was the true secret of this place. Not magic, not mystery, only patience, gentleness, and quiet care. The morning continued to unfold at its own peaceful pace. The flowers swayed softly. The stream kept singing its endless song. And somewhere beyond the blooming roses, a narrow stone pathway, half hidden beneath climbing ivy, caught Oliver's eye. It was a path he had not walked in a very long time. He looked at it with quiet curiosity. Then, with slow and gentle steps, he began walking toward it. Perhaps, the secret garden still had a few stories waiting to be discovered. The narrow stone path had almost disappeared beneath the ivy. Tiny green leaves covered its edges. Soft moss rested between the old stones. It looked as though very few footsteps had passed this way for many years. Oliver paused for a moment. Then, with gentle hands, he brushed a few vines aside. The path slowly revealed itself. Not as something forgotten, but as something patiently waiting. He smiled. The secret garden had always been full of little surprises. Some appeared only to those who moved slowly enough to notice them. With calm, unhurried steps, he continued walking. The morning breeze drifted quietly through the trees. Somewhere above, Oliver stopped. Even after all these years, this place still filled him with quiet wonder. In the center of the clearing stood a small round pond. Its water was perfectly still. Dragonflies hovered quietly in the warm morning air. A family of tiny frogs sat peacefully among the reeds. No one disturbed them. Everything existed together in perfect harmony. Beside the pond, an old willow tree stretched its graceful branches toward the water. Its long green leaves swayed gently with every passing breeze. Oliver walked beneath its shade. The bark felt warm beneath the morning sun. "I remember when you were only a little tree," he whispered with a gentle smile. The willow had grown alongside him. Year after year, season after season, its roots had reached deeper into the earth. Just as Oliver's love for the garden had quietly grown over time. He settled onto a smooth stone beside the pond. There was nothing he needed to do for a little while. No flowers to trim, no paths to sweep, no branches to tie, only the simple joy of being present. The pond reflected the peaceful sky above. A butterfly drifted slowly across the water. Small ripples appeared as a gentle breeze touched the surface. Then, everything became still once again. Oliver believed every garden should have one quiet place like this. A place not meant for working. A place simply meant for resting. For listening. For breathing. For noticing the little things that were so often missed. As the morning grew warmer, a family of ducks glided silently across the pond. Behind them, tiny ducklings followed in a perfect little line. Oliver watched them with a soft smile. Their gentle movements brought a feeling of quiet happiness. Nothing extraordinary was happening, yet somehow, everything felt beautiful. He reached into the pocket of his gardening coat and found a few small crumbs of homemade bread from breakfast. Carefully, he placed them on a nearby stone. The ducks wandered over slowly. Never rushing, never afraid, Oliver remained perfectly still. The secret garden had taught him something long ago. Nature always came closer to those who waited patiently. The ducks enjoyed their little breakfast before quietly returning to the water. The clearing became peaceful once more. Far above, white clouds drifted lazily across the blue sky. The warm scent of roses floated gently on the breeze. The willow leaves whispered softly overhead. Oliver closed his eyes for just a moment. He listened to the quiet rhythm of the garden, the gentle splash of water, the distant birdsong, the soft rustle of leaves. These simple sounds had become the music of his life, and he could not imagine a more beautiful melody. After a while, he opened his eyes again. On the far side of the pond, hidden beneath climbing ivy, he noticed something unusual. A small wooden gate, old, weathered, almost completely covered by flowering vines. Oliver looked at it thoughtfully. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had opened it. Perhaps, beyond that little gate, another peaceful corner of the secret garden was waiting. He smiled gently, but there was no need to hurry. The garden had waited many years. It could wait just a little longer. The little wooden gate remained quietly hidden beneath the climbing ivy. Its faded green paint had almost disappeared beneath years of gentle sunshine and rain. Small white flowers climbed across its frame. Tiny leaves danced softly in the morning breeze. Oliver stepped closer. He rested one hand upon the old wooden latch. For a moment, he simply stood there, not because he was uncertain, but because he believed every quiet place deserved to be entered slowly. With a gentle push, the gate opened with the softest creak. Beyond it lay a narrow path lined with smooth stones. Sunlight filtered through tall trees overhead. Their branches formed a peaceful green canopy. The air felt cooler here. Fresh, calm, almost untouched. Oliver smiled. Even after so many years, the garden still held little places waiting to be rediscovered. He followed the winding path. Wildflowers grew freely along both sides. Bluebells, foxgloves, tiny white daisies. No neat rows, no careful patterns, only nature growing exactly as it wished. Bees drifted lazily between the blossoms. Butterflies floated through the warm patches of sunlight. Somewhere nearby, a gentle stream could be heard. Its quiet song followed him through the trees. Soon, the path opened into another hidden corner. At its center stood an old wooden swing. It hung from the wide branch of a magnificent oak tree. The ropes were strong, the wooden seat smooth with age. Someone had cared for it long ago. Now, it waited peacefully beneath the leaves. Oliver brushed away a few fallen petals before sitting down. Very gently, the swing moved back and forth. Not high, not fast, just enough to follow the rhythm of the breeze. He looked upward. Sunlight shimmered between thousands of green leaves. The branches swayed softly against the bright blue sky. A squirrel climbed quietly along one of the branches above. It paused for a moment, curious, then continued its peaceful morning journey. Oliver closed his eyes. The swing continued its slow, gentle motion. Forward, and back. Forward, and back. The breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming jasmine. Birdsong echoed softly through the trees. The stream whispered nearby. Everything felt wonderfully peaceful. Sometimes, Oliver thought, the garden was not only a place filled with flowers. It was a place that reminded people how to slow down, how to breathe, how to notice small moments that were easy to miss. After a little while, He opened his eyes once more. The sunlight had become warmer. The morning was gently becoming afternoon. He stood from the swing, straightened his straw hat, and smiled at the quiet little corner. "I'll visit again soon," he whispered. As he continued along the path, a delicate fragrance drifted through the air. It was unlike any flower he had smelled before. Soft, sweet, almost magical. Oliver followed the gentle scent. Somewhere ahead, hidden beyond the trees, another beautiful part of the secret garden was waiting to welcome him. Oliver followed the gentle fragrance at an easy, unhurried pace. The narrow path curved between flowering shrubs and tall green ferns. Tiny rays of sunlight slipped through the branches above. They painted soft patches of gold across the ground. The air felt pleasantly warm. Yet beneath the trees, everything remained cool and peaceful. The sweet fragrance grew stronger with every step. It wasn't the scent of roses, nor lavender. It was lighter, gentler, almost like honey carried by a summer breeze. Oliver smiled. He knew exactly where the path was leading. After a few quiet moments, the trees slowly opened into a sunny clearing. There, stretching as far as he could see, bloomed hundreds of white jasmine flowers. Their delicate blossoms covered graceful vines climbing over small wooden arches. The entire garden seemed wrapped in their gentle perfume. Oliver took a slow, comfortable breath. Every summer, this hidden corner became one of his favorite places. Not because it was the most beautiful, but because it was the quietest. Even the birds seemed to sing more softly here. A small stone path wandered through the jasmine garden. Oliver followed it carefully. He paused now and then. Not to work, simply to admire each blossom. Some flowers had just opened. Others were beginning to fade. Each one beautiful in its own time. That was something the garden had taught him long ago. Nothing needed to bloom forever. To be precious. A gentle breeze drifted through the vines. Thousands of tiny white petals swayed together. For a brief moment, it looked as though the flowers were dancing. Oliver couldn't help but smile. Near the center of the clearing stood a small wooden table. Beside it rested two old chairs. A simple teapot sat quietly in the middle. It had not been used for many years. Yet it remained clean, almost as though the garden itself had been caring for it. Oliver brushed away a few fallen petals, then placed one hand upon the smooth wooden table. He imagined peaceful afternoons shared here long ago. Warm tea, gentle conversations, quiet laughter carried by the wind. The thought filled him with quiet happiness. Above the table, a family of swallows circled gracefully through the bright blue sky. Far away, the familiar sound of the little stream continued its endless journey. The secret garden never felt silent. It simply spoke in gentle voices. Leaves whispering, water flowing, birds singing, bees humming softly among the blossoms. It was a kind of music that could never be hurried. Oliver sat for a little while beneath the jasmine-covered arch. He closed his eyes. The warm sunlight rested gently upon his face. The breeze carried the sweet fragrance all around him. For a few peaceful minutes, there was nothing to think about, nothing to remember, nothing to plan, only this quiet summer morning, only this beautiful hidden garden. When he finally stood again, the shadows had grown just a little longer. Afternoon was slowly approaching. Oliver adjusted his straw hat. smiled toward the blooming jasmine one last time, and quietly continued along the winding path. Somewhere beyond the next row of flowering trees, the gentle sound of flowing water had become a little louder. Perhaps another peaceful corner of the secret garden was waiting just off. The gentle sound of flowing water became clearer with every step. Oliver followed it without hurry. The winding path slowly led him between tall ferns and flowering bushes. Above him, the leaves shimmered softly in the warm afternoon light. A peaceful breeze carried the fresh scent of green grass and wildflowers. Soon, the trees opened to reveal a beautiful little stream. Its water was so clear that every smooth stone beneath the surface could be seen. Tiny fish drifted lazily with the gentle current. Sunlight danced upon the rippling water like hundreds of tiny stars. Oliver smiled. This quiet stream had flowed through the secret garden for longer than anyone could remember. He knelt beside the water. With slow hands, he dipped his fingers into the cool stream. The water felt wonderfully refreshing. Small ripples spread gently across the surface. A dragonfly landed quietly on a nearby reed. Its delicate wings sparkled in the sunlight. For a few peaceful moments, nothing moved except the flowing water. Oliver always believed the stream carried away every worried thought. Whenever life felt heavy, he would come here, sit beside the water, and simply listen. The stream never rushed, yet it never stopped moving forward. Perhaps there was a quiet lesson hidden within its gentle journey. Nearby stood a small wooden bridge. Its curved rails were covered with soft green moss. Tiny white flowers grew between the old wooden planks. Oliver crossed the bridge slowly. Each step made the faintest little creak. On the other side, he found a sunny meadow filled with tall wildflowers. Golden butterflies floated through the warm afternoon air. Bees hummed peacefully from blossom to blossom. The meadow seemed to glow beneath the summer sunshine. In the distance, a family of deer quietly grazed near the edge of the trees. They lifted their heads for only a moment, then calmly returned to the soft green grass. The animals of the secret garden never seemed afraid. They had learned that kindness lived here. Oliver rested beneath the shade of a young maple tree. From his small woven basket, he took out a simple lunch. Fresh bread, a slice of cheese, a crisp apple, and a small bottle of cool spring water. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, yet somehow, meals always tasted better beneath an open sky. He ate slowly, listening to birds singing overhead, watching white clouds drift peacefully across the endless blue. When he finished, he carefully collected every crumb. The garden had given him so much beauty. The least he could do was leave it just as peaceful as he had found it. A gentle wind passed through the meadow. The tall grasses swayed together like gentle waves upon a quiet sea. Oliver stood, placed his basket over one arm, and took one last look across the peaceful landscape. The afternoon sunlight had begun to soften. Long shadows stretched across the wildflowers. Somewhere beyond the meadow, the old garden bell rang once. A quiet reminder that evening was slowly making its way toward the secret garden. With a contented smile, Oliver turned toward the winding path, ready to enjoy the calm beauty of another peaceful evening. The afternoon slowly faded into evening. The sunlight became softer, warmer. Long golden rays stretched gently across the secret garden. Every flower seemed to glow beneath the peaceful light. Oliver followed the familiar stone path toward the western side of the garden. This was his favorite time of day. The busy hours had quietly passed. The birds no longer sang as loudly. Even the breeze seemed to slow its gentle dance. As he walked, he noticed the evening primroses beginning to bloom. Their pale yellow petals opened little by little, almost as though they had been patiently waiting for the sun to grow sleepy. Oliver always admired them. Some flowers greeted the morning. Others welcomed the evening. Each had its own perfect moment. Nearby, rows of lavender swayed softly in the cool breeze. Their calming fragrance filled the air. Honeybees had returned to their hives. Now only a few butterflies drifted peacefully among the blossoms. Everything felt quieter. Everything felt slower. At the end of the path stood a small wooden greenhouse. Its old glass windows reflected the golden sky. Oliver gently opened the door. Warm air greeted him. Inside, hundreds of tiny seedlings rested in neat wooden trays. Young herbs, little rose cuttings, fresh green vines, each one carefully cared for. Each one holding the promise of future seasons. Oliver picked up a small watering can. Very gently, he watered each tray. Not too much. Just enough. He believed plants, like people, needed kindness more than hurry. When he finished, he placed the watering can back on its shelf. A tiny sparrow had quietly flown inside. It rested upon a wooden beam near the ceiling. For a moment, the little bird and the old gardener simply shared the peaceful silence. Then, with a cheerful flutter of wings, the sparrow disappeared into the evening sky. Oliver smiled. He slowly closed the greenhouse door behind him. Outside, the sky had turned shades of soft orange and pale pink. The first evening star appeared above the distant hills. The secret garden looked even more magical beneath the fading light. He continued walking until he reached a small circular bench surrounding an ancient cherry tree. Although the blossoms had fallen weeks ago, its green leaves whispered gently in the evening breeze. Oliver sat down. He folded his hands comfortably and simply watched the sky. Clouds drifted slowly across the horizon. The air grew cooler. Somewhere nearby, a robin sang its final song of the day. Soon, the little garden lanterns hanging beside the paths would begin to glow. Not brightly, just enough to guide gentle evening walks. Oliver took one slow breath. Then another. The peaceful rhythm of the garden settled quietly around him. As daylight slowly disappeared, the secret garden prepared for another calm and restful night. And somewhere beyond the cherry tree, the tiny lanterns began to shine. One by one, like little stars, blooming among the flowers. Evening settled gently over the secret garden. The last golden light slipped behind the distant hills. One by one, the little garden lanterns glowed beside the winding stone paths. Their warm light was soft. Never too bright. Just enough to guide a quiet evening walk. Oliver always loved this peaceful hour. The garden seemed to breathe more slowly after sunset. The flowers rested. The birds tucked themselves safely among the branches. Only the gentle whisper of leaves and the quiet song of the stream remained. He walked without making a sound. The smooth stones beneath his boots had become familiar over many years. He no longer needed to think about where to step. The garden knew him, and he knew the garden. A cool evening breeze carried the sweet scent of jasmine through the air. The fragrance drifted gently between the flower beds. It mixed with the calming aroma of lavender and fresh herbs growing nearby. Oliver paused beside an old wooden gate covered with climbing roses. Beyond it, the moon had begun to rise above the trees. Its silver light rested softly upon the petals. Tiny drops of evening dew shimmered like little pearls. The entire garden seemed wrapped in quiet light. He continued toward the small stone fountain near the center of the garden. Crystal clear water flowed gently from its weathered bowl. The sound was steady, peaceful, comforting. Oliver sat upon the stone edge. He closed his eyes for a moment. The fountain, the breeze, the distant stream, together they created a melody that never changed. A melody he had listened to for most of his life. Above him, the stars slowly appeared across the darkening sky. First one, then another. Soon, hundreds of tiny lights sparkled above the sleeping valley. Oliver always enjoyed finding the brightest star. Not because it was special, but because it reminded him how quiet the world could become at night. A little owl landed gently on the branch of a nearby oak tree. It watched the garden in complete silence. Oliver smiled warmly. "Good evening," he whispered. The owl blinked once, then remained perfectly still. Neither of them needed to speak. Some moments were already complete. After a while, Oliver stood once more. He carried a small lantern in one hand. Its warm glow swayed gently with every step. He followed the familiar path back toward the cottage. The windows glowed with soft golden light. Smoke curled slowly from the old stone chimney. Home was waiting. Inside, he placed the lantern beside the doorway. A kettle soon began to sing quietly upon the stove. He prepared a cup of warm chamomile tea. Its gentle aroma filled the little kitchen. Taking the cup, he settled into his favorite wooden chair beside the open window. Cool night air drifted softly inside. Outside, the secret garden rested beneath the stars. Tomorrow morning, the flowers would welcome another sunrise. The birds would sing once again. And Oliver would begin another peaceful day. But for now, there was nothing left to do. Only to enjoy the quiet beauty of the night. He lifted his warm cup, smiled gently toward the moonlit garden, and listened as the peaceful sounds of nature slowly carried the day to its gentle end. The night grew deeper. A gentle silence settled over the secret garden. The little lanterns continued to glow beside the winding paths. Above them, the moon watched quietly from a sky filled with countless stars. Inside the stone cottage, Oliver finished the last sip of his warm chamomile tea. He carefully washed the small ceramic cup, placed it back on its wooden shelf, and smiled. He had followed this simple evening routine for many years. Every quiet habit, every gentle moment, had become part of the peaceful life he loved. Before going to bed, there was one last place he always visited. He picked up the little lantern once more, opened the cottage door, and stepped into the cool night air. The garden welcomed him with familiar sounds. Leaves whispered softly overhead. The little stream continued its endless song. Somewhere in the distance, a cricket sang beneath the flowers. Oliver walked slowly toward the heart of the garden. There stood the oldest oak tree. Its great branches reached high into the moonlit sky. Its roots rested deep beneath the earth. Many seasons had come and gone. Yet the old tree remained. Strong, quiet, patient. Oliver gently placed one hand upon its weathered trunk. He closed his eyes. Not to make a wish. Not to ask for anything. Only to say a silent thank you. Thank you. For another peaceful day. For blooming flowers. For singing birds. For gentle rain. For warm sunshine. And for the quiet gift of simple moments. A soft breeze passed through the branches. Thousands of leaves rustled together. It almost sounded like the garden was whispering back. Oliver smiled, then slowly turned toward home. The lantern light danced gently across the stone path. Behind him, the secret garden rested peacefully beneath the stars. Tomorrow, the roses would bloom again. The butterflies would return. The stream would continue its quiet journey. And another beautiful day would begin. As Oliver reached the cottage, he looked back one final time. The garden glowed beneath the silver moonlight. Calm, safe, timeless. He softly closed the wooden door. The lantern was placed beside his bed. Its warm light slowly faded. The little cottage became still. Outside, the night breeze drifted gently through the flowers. Inside, Oliver rested beneath his cozy blanket. Within moments, his breathing became slow and peaceful. And somewhere beyond dreams, the secret garden continued to bloom. Just as it always had. Perhaps, even now, it is still there, hidden beyond busy roads, beyond noisy cities, waiting quietly for anyone willing to slow down. Take a deep breath, and notice the beauty that has been there all along. Thank you for spending this peaceful evening in the secret garden. May your heart feel calm, your mind feel light, and your sleep be deep and restful. Good night, and until our next gentle journey, sleep well. End of episode 1. Good evening. The day is finally coming to a gentle close. The busy roads have grown quiet. The lights of distant towns begin to soften. And somewhere, far away from crowded streets, beyond rolling hills and peaceful forests, there is a quiet lake. Its water is so still that it reflects the sky like polished glass. Along its shore, nestled beneath tall pine trees, stands a small stone cottage. Its windows glow with a warm golden light. A little wooden dock reaches into the calm water. Beside it, a tiny rowboat rests quietly against the shore. The evening breeze carries the fresh scent of pine needles, wildflowers, and the clean air drifting across the lake. If you listen carefully, you might hear gentle waves touching the wooden dock. Perhaps the distant call of a loon, or the soft rustle of leaves dancing high above. Tonight, this peaceful little cottage will be our home. So before we step inside, allow yourself to become comfortable. Let your breathing grow slow and easy. Release the weight of the day. There is nothing to finish, nothing to solve. For this little while, the world can quietly wait. Welcome to Sleepy Stories to Relax. If sleep finds you before our journey ends, then this story has done exactly what it was meant to do. Now, let's walk together along the narrow path leading to the cottage. Tiny white daisies bloom beside the trail. Smooth stones crunch softly beneath your footsteps. The lake sparkles in the last light of the setting sun. A pair of graceful swans glide silently across the water. They leave only gentle ripples behind them. The little cottage has been standing here for many generations. Its stone walls are covered with climbing ivy. Its wooden roof has weathered countless seasons. Yet every morning, and every evening, it welcomes the lake with quiet patience. Inside lives a gentle man named Thomas. He is neither rich nor famous. Most people have never heard his name, and that has never troubled him. His days are simple. He wakes with the sunrise, brews a warm cup of tea, walks beside the lake, reads by the window, tends a small vegetable garden, and watches the changing seasons from his favorite wooden chair. Some might think his life is ordinary. Thomas believes it is extraordinary, because every peaceful morning, every drifting cloud, every bird that lands upon the water, feels like a quiet gift. And tonight, as the sky slowly fills with stars, we will spend a little time beside this beautiful lake. No rushing, no noise, only calm waters, warm light, and the gentle comfort of a place that has always known how to slow down. So, take one more slow breath, and quietly open the little wooden gate. The path to the lakeside cottage has been waiting for you. The first light of morning arrived quietly across the lake. A thin veil of mist floated above the still water. The pine trees stood peacefully along the shoreline. Their reflections rested gently upon the glass-like surface. Not even the smallest breeze disturbed the calm. Inside the little stone cottage, Thomas was already awake. He had never needed an alarm clock. For many years, the gentle sounds of nature had been enough. The distant song of birds, the quiet whisper of the lake, the soft creak of old wooden beams warming in the morning light. He opened the bedroom window. Cool, fresh air drifted inside. It carried the scent of pine trees, wildflowers, and clean water. Thomas smiled. Every morning felt like the beginning of a brand new story. He slowly folded his blanket, straightened the little room, then made his way downstairs. Each wooden step gave its familiar, gentle creak. The cottage was old, but every sound felt warm and welcoming. In the small kitchen, a copper kettle rested upon the stove. Thomas filled it with fresh water from a stone pitcher. Soon, the quiet sound of warming water filled the room. While he waited, he opened the cottage door. The lake stretched peacefully before him. A family of ducks glided across the water. Tiny ripples followed behind them. The morning mist slowly lifted toward the brightening sky. Beside the cottage, small blue flowers nodded gently in the breeze. A robin landed on the wooden fence. It sang a cheerful morning song. Thomas quietly nodded. "Good morning," he whispered. The little bird remained for a moment, as if returning the greeting. When the kettle began to sing, Thomas stepped back inside. He prepared a simple cup of herbal tea. Its gentle aroma filled the cozy kitchen. Holding the warm cup, he walked onto the small wooden porch. This had become his favorite part of every day. He never rushed his mornings. Instead, he watched the sunlight slowly spread across the lake. Golden reflections shimmered upon the calm water. The mist faded little by little. Every passing minute revealed another beautiful detail. A smooth stone beneath the clear water. A dragonfly resting on a reed. White water lilies opening toward the sun. Nature never hurried, yet it was always exactly on time. Thomas believed people could learn something from the lake. The water never rushed to reach the shore. The clouds never hurried across the sky. Even the trees grew quietly. one season at a time. He took another slow sip of tea. The warmth spread gently through his hands. A peaceful silence surrounded the little cottage. Not an empty silence, a comforting one, the kind that allowed every small sound to be heard. The gentle splash of water, the distant call of a bird, the whisper of pine branches moving together. After finishing his tea, Thomas placed the empty cup beside the door. He picked up his old straw hat, then reached for a small wicker basket. Every morning, he walked along the lakeshore before beginning the rest of his day. Not because he had somewhere to go, but because the lake always had something beautiful to share. With slow, comfortable steps, he left the porch behind. The narrow path curved gently beside the quiet water, and another peaceful morning was ready to unfold. Thomas followed the narrow path beside the quiet lake. The morning sun climbed a little higher. Its warm light slipped gently through the tall pine trees. Small patches of golden sunlight danced across the ground. The air remained cool and wonderfully fresh. He walked at the same peaceful pace he always did. Never too fast, never too slow. The lake had taught him that every beautiful morning deserved to be enjoyed, not hurried through. As he continued along the shoreline, he noticed smooth stones resting beneath the clear water. Tiny fish moved quietly between them. A pair of white swans glided gracefully across the lake. Their reflections shimmered beside them. Thomas stopped for a moment. He watched them without making a sound. The swans drifted effortlessly across the still water, leaving only gentle ripples behind. It was a simple sight, yet somehow, it never grew ordinary. Further along the path, a weathered wooden bench overlooked the lake. Its wood had grown smooth after many years of sunshine and rain. Thomas brushed away a few fallen pine needles, then quietly sat down. From here, he could see almost the entire lake. The distant hills, the pine forest, the little dock beside his cottage. Everything rested peacefully beneath the bright blue sky. He took a slow, comfortable breath. The fresh scent of pine filled the air. Wildflowers nodded gently beside the path. Somewhere nearby, a woodpecker tapped softly against an old tree. Far above, a hawk circled silently in the clear morning sky. The world felt calm, balanced, complete. Thomas reached into his wicker basket. Inside was a small notebook with a worn leather cover. Every morning, he wrote down one thing he had noticed by the lake. Not long sentences, just a few quiet thoughts. He opened a fresh page, then slowly wrote, "Today, the swans moved so gently that even the water seemed reluctant to disturb them." He smiled, closed the notebook, and slipped it back into the basket. There was no need to write more. Some moments spoke for themselves. After resting for a little while, Thomas stood once again. The wooden bench would still be here tomorrow, just as the lake would. He continued walking until he reached a little cove hidden between the trees. A small wooden rowboat rested at the edge of the shore. Its rope was tied loosely to an old oak post. The boat rocked gently with the tiny waves. Thomas stepped closer. He ran one hand along the smooth wooden side. The little boat had carried him across the lake through every season. Spring mornings, warm summer afternoons, colorful autumn evenings, quiet winter days. It had become an old friend. He untied the rope carefully. The boat drifted only a few inches from the shore. Thomas smiled. Perhaps this peaceful morning was the perfect time for another slow journey across the quiet lake. Thomas stepped carefully into the little wooden rowboat. It rocked gently beneath his feet. Only for a moment. Then it became perfectly still once again. He untied the last knot from the weathered wooden post. With one slow push, the boat quietly drifted away from the shore. The lake welcomed him with gentle ripples. Thomas picked up the old wooden oars. Their smooth handles fit comfortably in his hands. He had used them through countless peaceful mornings. With slow, steady strokes, the little boat glided across the calm water. No engine, no noise, only the soft splash of the oars. The sound echoed gently across the quiet lake. The farther he traveled, the quieter everything became. The shoreline slowly drifted behind him. The little stone cottage looked smaller now. Its warm chimney and ivy-covered walls rested peacefully among the tall pine trees. Thomas smiled. He loved seeing the cottage from the middle of the lake. It always looked as though it belonged perfectly to the landscape. Above him, white clouds floated lazily across the endless blue sky. Their reflections shimmered softly upon the water. For a moment, it became difficult to tell where the lake ended and where the sky began. A gentle breeze passed across the surface. Tiny ripples spread in every direction. Then, the water became smooth once more. A dragonfly flew beside the boat. Its delicate wings sparkled in the morning sunlight. It stayed nearby for a few peaceful seconds before disappearing toward the reeds along the shore. Thomas rested the oars across his knees. The boat continued drifting slowly on its own. There was nowhere he needed to be. No clock to watch, only the quiet rhythm of the lake. He looked down into the crystal clear water. Smooth stones rested beneath the surface. Tiny silver fish moved gracefully between patches of green water plants. Sunlight danced gently around them. Everything below felt just as peaceful as the world above. In the distance, a family of ducks crossed the lake in a neat little line. The ducklings followed closely behind their mother. Thomas watched until they disappeared behind a bed of tall reeds. Moments like these always reminded him that nature never needed to hurry to be beautiful. After a little while, he picked up the oars once again. With slow, gentle strokes, the boat drifted toward a tiny island near the center of the lake. It was a quiet place. No houses, no roads, only a few ancient oak trees, soft green grass, and colorful wildflowers blooming beneath the sunshine. As the boat reached the small wooden landing, Thomas quietly smiled. Every visit to the little island felt like discovering it for the very first time. He secured the rope to the dock, stepped gently onto the weathered wooden planks, and looked around. The island was as peaceful as he remembered. Perhaps this calm little place still had another beautiful morning waiting to be shared. Thomas stepped slowly from the little dock onto the soft green grass. The tiny island welcomed him with peaceful silence. Wildflowers bloomed in every direction. White daisies, blue cornflowers, golden buttercups. They swayed gently beneath the warm summer breeze. An old stone path curved through the middle of the island. It was narrow, almost hidden beneath patches of soft moss. Thomas followed it with slow, comfortable steps. Above him, Ancient oak trees stretched their wide branches across the bright blue sky. Sunlight filtered gently through the leaves. Small circles of golden light danced upon the path. The air carried the fresh scent of grass, wild herbs, and the nearby lake. Everything felt calm. Everything felt unhurried. Soon, the path led him to a quiet meadow. In its center stood a single wooden bench. It faced the open water. From here, the little stone cottage looked like a tiny painting resting among the pine trees. Thomas smiled softly. He had visited this bench through every season. Spring blossoms, summer mornings, golden autumn afternoons, even peaceful winter days when snow covered the island. Every visit felt different, yet somehow, it always felt like coming home. He sat down. The bench was warm from the morning sunshine. A gentle breeze crossed the lake. The tall grass moved like slow waves. Nearby, a pair of rabbits quietly nibbled on clover. They looked up for only a moment, then calmly returned to their breakfast. Thomas remained perfectly still. Nature always seemed to trust those who moved gently. Above the meadow, a few white clouds drifted lazily across the sky. Their reflections shimmered on the lake below. The water looked almost endless. Smooth, bright, peaceful. Thomas reached into his basket. This time, he took out a small cloth bundle. Inside was a simple breakfast. Fresh bread, a little honey, a crisp pear, and a small bottle of cool spring water. He enjoyed each bite slowly. There was no reason to rush. Meals tasted different outdoors. The fresh air, the quiet sounds of birds, and the soft breeze made even the simplest food feel special. When he finished, he carefully folded the cloth again. Not a single crumb remained behind. He believed every beautiful place deserved to be left just as beautiful. As he stood, a gentle ringing sound drifted through the air. It was soft, almost like a tiny bell carried by the wind. Thomas listened carefully, then smiled. The sound came from dozens of small glass wind chimes hanging beneath the branches of an old oak tree. The breeze moved them ever so gently. Each chime sang a different note. Together, they created a peaceful melody unlike anything else around the lake. Thomas closed his eyes for a moment. The quiet music blended with the rustling leaves, the distant birdsong, and the gentle waves touching the shore. It was the kind of sound that invited the mind to become still. After a few peaceful moments, he opened his eyes once more. The sun had climbed a little higher. The lake sparkled beneath its warm light. It was almost time to return to the little boat. But first, he decided to take one last slow walk beneath the old oak trees. Perhaps, the island still had one more quiet surprise waiting along its peaceful path. Thomas followed the shaded path beneath the old oak trees. The leaves above formed a gentle green roof. Sunlight slipped through in soft golden ribbons. The ground was cool beneath his boots. Small patches of moss covered the stones. The air smelled of fresh earth, wild mint, and warm pine. The little island seemed even quieter here. Only the breeze moved gently through the branches. After a short walk, Thomas discovered a tiny garden tucked between the trees. It was simple, almost hidden. Flat stones formed a small circle around colorful wildflowers. There were no fences, no signs, only nature growing peacefully together. Purple lavender, white chamomile, tiny blue forget-me-nots, and bright yellow buttercups. Bees floated lazily from flower to flower. A butterfly rested quietly on a daisy. Thomas smiled. Someone had planted this little garden many years ago. Now, nature was caring for it in its own gentle way. He knelt beside the flowers. A few dry leaves had fallen among the blossoms. With slow, careful hands, he gathered them into his basket. He didn't change the garden. He simply helped it breathe a little more freely. A soft breeze passed through the clearing. The flowers swayed together. Their gentle fragrance filled the warm afternoon air. Thomas remained there for a few peaceful moments. Listening, watching, breathing slowly. Nearby, a smooth stone rested beneath the shade of an old tree. He sat down. From here, he could see small birds hopping between the branches. A red squirrel paused on a tree trunk. It looked at Thomas curiously, then disappeared into the leaves. The little garden returned to its peaceful silence. Thomas reached into his pocket. He found a tiny cloth pouch filled with wildflower seeds. Every visit, he scattered just a few. Never many. Only enough to let the island become a little more colorful each year. He opened the pouch. The breeze carried the tiny seeds gently across the meadow. Perhaps, next spring, new flowers would bloom here. Not because anyone expected them, but simply because nature enjoys quiet surprises. Thomas stood once again. The afternoon sun had begun to soften. Long shadows stretched beneath the trees. Somewhere beyond the island, the calm lake shimmered beneath the light. He could already see the little rowboat waiting patiently at the dock. It rocked gently with the water, as though it had been resting too. Thomas smiled warmly. He gave the little hidden garden one final glance, then followed the winding path back toward the shore. The peaceful melody of the lake welcomed him once again. Another quiet adventure had gently come to an end. And now, the calm journey home was about to begin. Thomas untied the little rowboat from the wooden dock. It drifted gently away from the island. The water was calm. Only tiny ripples followed behind the boat. He rested the oars in the water, then began rowing with slow, peaceful strokes. The island grew smaller with every passing moment. Its tall oak trees stood quietly beneath the afternoon sky. The little garden disappeared behind the leaves. Yet its peaceful feeling remained with him. The lake stretched wide in every direction. Its surface reflected the soft white clouds above. For a moment, it seemed as though the boat was floating through the sky. Thomas smiled at the quiet thought. A cool breeze brushed gently across the water. It carried the fresh scent of pine trees from the distant shore. Somewhere nearby, a kingfisher flew low across the lake. Its bright blue feathers flashed for only a second. Then it disappeared among the reeds. Thomas paused his rowing. He allowed the boat to drift on its own. There was no hurry. The lake always seemed to know exactly where to carry him. He leaned back comfortably. Above him, the clouds moved slowly across the endless blue. Below him, the clear water reflected every gentle movement. It was difficult to tell which sky was real. A pair of dragonflies danced above the surface. They circled one another before gliding away together. Near the edge of the lake, tall reeds swayed softly in the breeze. A family of turtles rested on a smooth sunlit log. One by one, they quietly slipped into the water. Only tiny circles remained where they had been. Thomas laughed softly. The lake was full of small moments. Moments that many people might never notice. Yet to him, they were the most beautiful part of every day. After a while, he picked up the oars once again. The little cottage was now clearly visible. Its stone walls glowed warmly beneath the afternoon sunlight. Thin curls of ivy climbed gently toward the roof. The small wooden dock reached peacefully into the lake, waiting patiently, just as it always had. As the boat reached the shore, Thomas tied the rope neatly around the old wooden post. He stepped onto the dock. The wood gave its familiar, gentle creak beneath his boots. He paused before walking home. The lake behind him shimmered quietly in the golden light. The afternoon was slowly becoming evening. Soon, the first lantern beside the cottage porch would be lit. A warm fire would crackle softly inside. And another peaceful chapter of the day would begin. With a contented smile, Thomas picked up his wicker basket. Then followed the flower-lined path toward the little cottage, where comfort, warmth, and quiet evening light were already waiting for him. The sun slowly lowered behind the distant hills. Its golden light became softer with every passing minute. Long shadows stretched across the lakeshore. The little cottage seemed to glow beneath the peaceful evening sky. Thomas walked slowly along the flower-lined path. The wicker basket rested lightly in his hand. The air had grown cooler now. A gentle breeze carried the calming scent of pine, lavender, and the fresh lake water. He opened the little wooden gate. It gave its familiar, gentle creak. The cottage welcomed him home once again. Inside, everything was just as he had left it. The wooden table stood beside the window. A stack of well-loved books rested on the shelf. A small rocking chair waited quietly near the fireplace. Thomas smiled. Simple places often held the greatest comfort. He placed the basket on the kitchen counter, then gathered a few pieces of dry firewood from the basket beside the hearth. With practiced hands, he carefully arranged the logs. A single match sparked to life. Within moments, a small fire began to glow. The flames danced gently. Their warm light filled the room with a peaceful golden color. Soon, the comforting sound of crackling wood blended with the quiet evening outside. Thomas placed the old copper kettle on the stove. As the water slowly warmed, he opened the window just a little. Fresh evening air drifted inside. The curtains moved softly in the breeze. From somewhere across the lake, he heard the distant call of a loon. Its lonely, gentle voice echoed over the still water. The sound faded slowly into the evening silence. When the kettle began its quiet song, Thomas prepared a cup of chamomile tea with a touch of honey. The sweet, gentle aroma filled the cozy kitchen. Holding the warm cup, he settled into the old rocking chair beside the fire. The chair moved slowly, forward, and back, forward, and back. The rhythm was calm, comforting. Outside, the sky turned shades of soft orange, pink, and lavender. The lake reflected every beautiful color. A few swallows made their final flight across the water before returning to their nests. Thomas opened one of his favorite books. It was old. Its pages had turned slightly golden with time. He wasn't reading quickly, only a page or two. Just enough to enjoy the quiet words while listening to the fire. Every now and then, He looked out through the window. The evening became more peaceful with every passing moment. The first little lantern beside the dock flickered to life. Its warm glow reflected gently upon the water. Another lantern lit the garden path. Then another. Until the cottage seemed surrounded by tiny stars. Thomas closed the book with a quiet smile. He placed it carefully on the small table beside him. Outside, the last light of day slowly disappeared beyond the hills. Night was gently arriving, and the little cottage, wrapped in warmth, soft firelight, and peaceful silence, felt like the coziest place in the world. Night settled gently over the quiet lake. The last colors of sunset faded into a deep blue sky. One by one, the stars appeared above the peaceful water. Their reflections shimmered softly with every tiny ripple. Inside the little cottage, the fire continued to glow warmly. Its gentle crackling filled the room with a comforting rhythm. Thomas placed another small log upon the fire. Bright sparks rose for a moment, then quietly disappeared up the chimney. He wrapped a soft wool blanket around his shoulders. The warmth of the fire, the quiet evening, and the calm lake outside made the little cottage feel wonderfully peaceful. Carrying his lantern, Thomas stepped onto the wooden porch. The cool night air greeted him gently. The scent of pine trees drifted through the darkness. Somewhere across the lake, a small owl called from the forest. Its quiet voice echoed once, then faded into silence. Thomas walked slowly toward the end of the dock. The wooden boards creaked softly beneath his feet. He had walked this same path thousands of times. Yet every night, it felt just as special. The lake was perfectly still. The moon had risen above the hills. Its silver light stretched across the water like a quiet ribbon. Thomas stood without speaking. There was nothing to say. Some evenings were already perfect. A pair of swans floated peacefully beneath the moonlight. They moved so slowly that their reflections remained almost unbroken. Nearby, tiny fish created small circles upon the water. Each ripple caught the moonlight before gently fading away. Thomas rested both hands upon the smooth wooden railing. He looked toward the distant shoreline. The pine forest stood quietly beneath the stars. Not a single light could be seen. Only nature, peaceful and undisturbed. He took one long, slow breath. The cool air felt wonderfully fresh. It carried away every busy thought, every little worry, leaving only calm behind. For a few quiet minutes, he simply listened. The gentle waves touching the dock, the whisper of leaves moving high above, the distant song of crickets hidden among the grass. Each sound blended together like a peaceful lullaby. Thomas smiled softly. He believed the lake changed people. Not all at once, but little by little. Each quiet morning, each peaceful sunset, each star-filled night, made the heart a little lighter. At last, he lifted the lantern once more. Its warm golden light swayed gently as he walked back toward the cottage. Behind him, the moon continued watching over the silent lake. The swans drifted quietly across the silver water, and the little dock rested peacefully beneath the endless night sky. Tomorrow, another beautiful sunrise would arrive. But for now, the lake had wrapped itself in silence, inviting every heart to rest. The night grew quieter with every passing moment. Inside the little cottage, the fire had become a bed of glowing embers. Their soft orange light danced gently across the wooden floor. Thomas placed the lantern beside the window. Its warm glow joined the fading light of the fireplace. Together, they filled the room with a gentle sense of comfort. He walked slowly through the cottage. The little bookshelf, the old wooden table, the rocking chair beside the fire. Everything was simple. Everything was familiar. And somehow, that was exactly what made it so special. Thomas opened the window one last time. The cool night breeze drifted softly inside. Outside, the lake rested beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The little dock stood quietly at the water's edge. The rowboat rocked almost imperceptibly with the gentle waves. It seemed to be sleeping too. Thomas smiled. He softly closed the window, then paused for a moment beside the fireplace. He looked at the quiet room with grateful eyes. Not because it was large, not because it was luxurious, but because it had always been filled with peace. He whispered a quiet thank you. For the calm lake, for the gentle breeze, for the singing birds, for another beautiful day. Then he climbed the wooden staircase. Each step gave its familiar little creak. At the top, the bedroom waited beneath the sloping roof. Moonlight slipped gently through the curtains. It painted soft silver patterns across the floor. Thomas placed his straw hat on its wooden hook, folded his sweater neatly over the chair, then settled beneath a warm quilt. The pillow felt cool and comfortable. Outside, the wind whispered through the tall pine trees. Somewhere across the lake, a lone owl called once. Then silence returned. Thomas closed his eyes. His breathing became slow, steady, peaceful. The little cottage grew wonderfully still. Outside, the moon continued to shine upon the quiet water. The stars reflected gently across the lake. The swans rested near the reeds. The rowboat floated patiently beside the dock. Everything had found its place. And perhaps, as you listen to the calm sounds of this peaceful lakeside home, you, too, can imagine the cool night air, the gentle warmth of the fire, and the quiet comfort of a place where nothing ever needs to be rushed. May your thoughts become lighter. May your heart become calmer. And may sleep find you as gently as the moonlight found the lake tonight. Thank you for spending this peaceful evening beside the little cottage. Until our next gentle journey. Sleep well. Good night. Good evening. The day is slowly drawing to a peaceful close. The sky is painted with soft shades of gold, blue, and gentle lavender. Far beyond busy cities, beyond quiet villages, where the land meets the endless sea, there stands a lonely lighthouse. It has watched over the cliffs for longer than anyone can remember. Its white stone walls have welcomed countless sunrises. Its warm lantern has shone through peaceful nights. And every morning, the gentle sound of the waves rises from the shore below. The sea never rushes. It simply arrives, again and again, with the same quiet rhythm. Tonight, our journey takes us to this peaceful place. A lighthouse resting upon tall white cliffs, surrounded by wild grasses, sea breezes, and the endless horizon. Before we begin, allow yourself to become comfortable. Let your shoulders grow lighter. Let your breathing become slow and natural. There is nowhere you need to be. Nothing waiting for your attention. For this little while, the world can quietly carry on without you. Welcome to Sleepy Stories to Relax. If sleep finds you before our story reaches its ending, Then let it come gently. The lighthouse will still be here when morning arrives. A narrow stone path winds across the grassy cliffs. Tiny white wildflowers bloom beside it. The evening breeze moves softly through the tall grass. Far below, gentle waves kiss the rocky shoreline. The air smells fresh, clean, filled with the scent of the sea. At the end of the path, the lighthouse stands quietly against the evening sky. Its windows glow with warm golden light. Beside it rests a small stone cottage. Simple, cozy, timeless. This is the home of Elias, a gentle man in his early 70s. His silver hair moves softly in the ocean breeze. His weathered face carries the peaceful smile of someone who has learned to enjoy simple days. Every morning, he climbs the lighthouse stairs, polishes the great glass lantern, brews fresh tea, feeds the friendly seabirds that visit the cliffs, and spends quiet hours reading beside the window overlooking the sea. Some people dream of crowded adventures. Elias never has. His greatest joy is watching the changing colors of the ocean, listening to the waves, feeling the cool sea breeze, and welcoming another peaceful sunrise. As evening slowly settles across the cliffs, the first stars begin to appear above the endless water. The lighthouse lantern glows warmly behind its great glass windows. Its gentle light turns slowly, casting a quiet beam across the calm sea. Somewhere in the distance, a lone seabird glides silently above the waves. The world feels wonderfully still. Take one slow breath, then another, and together, let's walk toward the lighthouse, where another peaceful story is waiting to unfold. The first light of morning arrived quietly over the sea. A soft silver mist floated above the water. The horizon was almost impossible to see. Sea and sky blended together in peaceful silence. High above the waves, the lighthouse stood patiently on the white cliffs. Its great lantern had guided the night. Now, as dawn slowly arrived, its gentle light faded with the stars. Inside the little stone cottage, Elias was already awake. He had never needed an alarm. For many years, the sea had been his morning clock. The distant rhythm of the waves, the gentle cry of seagulls, the whisper of the wind around the lighthouse tower. He opened the wooden window. Cool ocean air drifted quietly into the room. It carried the fresh scent of salt, seagrass, and the clean morning breeze. Elias smiled. Every sunrise beside the sea felt wonderfully new. He folded his blanket neatly, straightened the little bedroom, then made his way downstairs. The old wooden steps gave their familiar, gentle creak. In the small kitchen, a blue enamel kettle rested upon the stove. He filled it with fresh spring water kept in a cool stone jar. Soon, the quiet sound of warming water filled the cottage. While the kettle slowly heated, Elias stepped outside. The cliffs stretched peacefully beneath the brightening sky. Tiny white flowers nodded gently among the tall grasses. Far below, the waves rolled toward the shore with their calm, endless rhythm. A few seagulls glided effortlessly on the morning breeze. One landed quietly upon the old wooden fence. Elias smiled warmly. "Good morning, my friend." The little bird tilted its head, as though listening carefully. When the kettle began its gentle song, he returned inside. He prepared a warm cup of herbal tea. The comforting aroma filled the little cottage. Holding the cup, He climbed the narrow spiral staircase inside the lighthouse. Step by step, the view grew wider. The sound of the sea became softer. At the very top, sunlight poured gently through the tall glass windows. The great lantern stood quietly in the center. Its polished glass sparkled in the morning light. Elias carefully wiped away the fine layer of sea mist that had settled during the night. It was a simple task, one he had performed thousands of times. Yet he never grew tired of it, because every clear window meant another peaceful night of guiding distant sailors. When his work was finished, he stood beside the great windows. Far across the calm sea, a tiny white sailboat drifted slowly along the horizon. It moved so gently, it seemed almost part of the morning mist. Elias took one slow sip of tea. The warmth rested comfortably in his hands. Outside, the sun rose a little higher. Golden light spread across the water. The cliffs, the lighthouse, and the endless sea welcomed another quiet and beautiful day. The morning had fully awakened. Sunlight rested gently upon the white cliffs. The sea shimmered beneath a clear blue sky. A light breeze carried the fresh scent of salt and wild grass. Elias stepped out of the lighthouse. He closed the wooden door quietly behind him. In one hand, he carried a small woven basket. Inside were a few slices of fresh bread. Not for himself, but for the friendly seabirds that visited the cliffs each morning. He followed the narrow path along the cliff's edge. The grass swayed softly around his boots. Tiny white and yellow wildflowers bloomed between the stones. The path had become as familiar to him as the rooms of his own home. Soon, he reached a wide grassy overlook. It faced the endless sea. The horizon stretched farther than the eye could see. There, a group of gentle seagulls had already gathered. Some stood quietly in the grass. Others circled gracefully above the cliffs. As Elias approached, none of them flew away. They knew him well. He smiled and scattered a few small pieces of bread across the ground. The birds hopped forward one by one. There was no rushing, no fighting, only the quiet rhythm of another peaceful morning. Elias remained still. Watching them always brought him a quiet sense of happiness. When the last crumb had disappeared, the seagulls lifted into the air together. Their white wings caught the sunlight beautifully. For a few moments, they floated effortlessly above the sea, then slowly drifted toward the open horizon. Elias continued walking. The cliff path curved gently toward a weathered wooden bench. It overlooked both the lighthouse and the endless ocean beyond. He brushed away a few blades of grass before taking a seat. The bench had stood there for many years. It had welcomed quiet mornings, golden afternoons, and peaceful evenings beneath the stars. From here, he could see waves rolling gently against the rocks far below. Each wave arrived quietly. Each wave returned quietly. The sea never seemed to grow tired of its gentle rhythm. Elias reached into his basket once more. This time, he removed a small leather-bound journal. Its pages had become slightly worn with time. Every morning, he wrote down one simple observation. Never long stories, only small moments worth remembering. He opened to a fresh page. Then slowly wrote, "Today, the seagulls trusted the morning as completely as the sea trusted the shore." He smiled, closed the journal, and placed it carefully back inside the basket. Some memories didn't need many words. They simply needed a quiet place to rest. As he stood, a gentle sound drifted through the air. It wasn't the sea, nor the wind. It was the soft ringing of a small brass bell hanging beside the lighthouse entrance. The breeze moved it ever so gently. Its peaceful tone echoed across the cliffs. Elias paused for a moment, then looked toward the lighthouse. Its white tower stood proudly beneath the bright morning sky. Its lantern windows sparkled like crystal in the sunlight. Another calm morning had almost passed. Soon, it would be time for a slow walk toward the western cliffs, where the ocean breeze carried stories only the waves seemed to know. Elias followed the narrow trail toward the western cliffs. The path wound gently through tall grasses that swayed with the sea breeze. Wild thyme grew between the white stones. Its fresh, earthy fragrance drifted softly through the warm morning air. The farther he walked, the quieter the lighthouse became behind him. Only the steady rhythm of the waves remained. It was a sound that had filled his days for many years. Always familiar, always comforting. Soon, the path reached a quiet overlook where the cliffs curved gently toward the sea. There stood an old wooden lookout platform. Its weathered boards had been polished smooth by countless seasons of wind and sunshine. Elias stepped onto the platform. He rested both hands upon the wooden railing. Far below, the sea moved in slow, endless patterns. Small waves curled gently toward the rocky shore. White foam appeared for only a moment, before quietly melting back into the blue water. A few sailboats drifted peacefully on the distant horizon. Their white sails caught the sunlight like tiny feathers. They seemed to move without effort, as though the wind itself carried them with gentle hands. Elias always enjoyed wondering where they might be going. Not because he needed to know, but because every quiet journey carried a little mystery. Above the cliffs, a pair of seabirds floated gracefully on the rising air. They hardly moved their wings. The breeze did all the work. Watching them always reminded Elias that sometimes, the gentlest path forward required the least effort. He remained there for several peaceful minutes, breathing slowly, listening carefully. The sea had its own language, not spoken with words, but with waves, with wind, with silence. After a while, he noticed a narrow stone staircase leading down toward a small cove. The steps had been carved into the cliff many years ago. Soft green moss covered their edges. Tiny white flowers bloomed between the cracks. Elias descended carefully, one slow step at a time. The air became cooler as he reached the bottom. The sound of the waves grew clearer. The little cove rested quietly between two white cliffs. Smooth stones covered the shore. Crystal clear water lapped gently at their edges. There was no dock, no boats, only the sea, meeting the land in perfect peace. Elias picked up a smooth white pebble. He turned it gently in his hand. The stone had been shaped patiently by the ocean. Not in days, not in years, but over countless tides. He smiled. Nature never hurried, yet somehow, everything became beautiful in its own time. He placed the pebble back where he had found it. Some treasures were meant to stay exactly where they belonged. A cool breeze drifted across the cove. The sunlight sparkled on the water like scattered silver. Elias looked toward the open sea one more time, then quietly began climbing the stone steps again. Above the cliffs, the lighthouse waited patiently. Its bright white tower stood against the endless blue sky, and somewhere beyond the grassy path, another peaceful corner of the cliffs was waiting to welcome him. The gentle climb back to the top of the cliffs felt easy. A cool sea breeze followed Elias with every step. When he reached the grassy path once again, he paused for a moment. The lighthouse stood quietly in the afternoon sunshine. Its white stone walls shone against the bright blue sky. Nearby, a small garden rested beside the cottage. Many visitors never noticed it. It was hidden behind a low stone wall covered with climbing roses. A simple wooden gate marked the entrance. Elias opened it gently. Inside, neat rows of lavender swayed in the breeze. White daisies smiled toward the sun. Rosemary, thyme, and mint filled the air with a fresh, calming fragrance. There were no rare flowers here. Only simple plants that welcomed bees, butterflies, and birds. In the center of the garden stood a weathered wooden bench. Beside it, an old clay birdbath reflected the afternoon sky. A pair of small sparrows landed on its edge. They took tiny sips of water before fluttering back into the garden. Elias smiled. He filled the birdbath with fresh water every morning. It had become a quiet meeting place for many little visitors. He picked up a small watering can. Moving slowly from one flower bed to another, he watered each plant with gentle care. Not too much, just enough. The soil darkened as it drank the cool water. Tiny droplets sparkled on the leaves. Everything seemed grateful for the simple kindness. A butterfly with bright orange wings drifted lazily across the lavender. For a few seconds, it rested upon a blossom, then floated away with the breeze. Elias placed the watering can beneath the wooden bench. He never hurried through the garden. Plants seemed to grow best when surrounded by patience. Beyond the stone wall, the endless sea continued its peaceful rhythm. The sound of the waves blended softly with the buzzing of bees. It felt like nature was playing a quiet song. He sat on the bench. The warm afternoon sun rested gently upon his shoulders. From here, he could see both the lighthouse and the sparkling ocean beyond. The view never became ordinary. Every cloud, every wave, every passing bird made the landscape feel new again. After a few peaceful minutes, Elias reached into the pocket of his cardigan. He pulled out a small brass compass. Its surface had become smooth after many years of use. He opened the lid. The tiny needle settled quietly toward the north. He smiled. The compass had always pointed in the same direction, just as the lighthouse had always offered its light. Both served their purpose without asking for attention. Elias closed the compass gently, then slipped it back into his pocket. The afternoon light had begun to soften. Long shadows stretched across the garden path. Somewhere beyond the cliffs, the sea breeze carried the distant sound of a ship's bell. It was quiet, almost hidden by the wind. Elias looked toward the horizon. Perhaps another peaceful evening was slowly making its way to Whispering Cliffs. The afternoon slowly drifted toward evening. The sunlight became softer, warmer. The white cliffs glowed with gentle shades of gold. Elias left the little garden behind. He followed a quiet path that curved around the western side of the lighthouse. Here, the sea breeze felt cooler. Tall grasses whispered softly as they swayed together. Every step carried the peaceful scent of salt air and wild herbs. Not far from the lighthouse, a small stone cottage stood alone. Its roof was covered with weathered gray slate. Its windows overlooked the endless sea. This was an old supply house. Long ago, keepers stored lantern oil, ropes, tools, and weather journals here. Today, only a few shelves remained, and a room filled with memories. Elias unlocked the wooden door. It opened with a familiar, gentle creak. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows. Tiny particles floated lazily in the golden light. Everything inside rested quietly. Coiled ropes, old wooden crates, a polished brass lantern from many years ago, a folded canvas sail. Nothing seemed forgotten, only patiently waiting. Against one wall stood a tall wooden bookshelf. Its shelves held dozens of weather journals, each one carefully labeled with a different year. Elias smiled. He gently removed one from the middle shelf. The leather cover had faded with time. He carried it to the window, then settled into a simple wooden chair. Slowly, he opened the journal. Inside were neat handwritten notes, not only about the weather, but about quiet moments beside the sea. One page read, "The waves were so calm today that even the clouds seemed to pause above them." Another simply said, "The lighthouse feels brightest on peaceful evenings." Elias smiled warmly. He always enjoyed these little thoughts. They reminded him that beauty often lived in ordinary days. He carefully closed the journal, then returned it to its place on the shelf. As he stepped outside once more, the afternoon breeze welcomed him again. The lighthouse stood quietly against the bright sky. Its white tower looked almost timeless. Far below, the sea continued its endless rhythm. A small fishing boat moved slowly across the water. Its wake spread gently behind it before fading away. Elias rested his hands in his pockets. There was still a little daylight left. Just enough time for one final walk along the cliffs, before evening painted the ocean with its golden light. He smiled, then followed the winding path toward the western overlook, where another peaceful moment was already waiting. The western path grew quieter as Elias continued walking. The sea stretched endlessly beside him. Its deep blue waters shimmered beneath the late afternoon sun. The breeze had become softer now, warm enough to be comforting, cool enough to feel refreshing. Wild grasses swayed gently along the edge of the cliffs. Their soft whispers blended perfectly with the rhythm of the waves below. Elias always loved this hour of the day. The world seemed to slow down. Even the clouds drifted more peacefully across the sky. Soon, he reached his favorite place on the cliffs. It was a small wooden bench overlooking the open sea. The bench faced west. Every evening, it offered the perfect view of the setting sun. He brushed away a few fallen leaves before sitting down. The wood felt warm after spending the day beneath the sunshine. From here, he could see the lighthouse standing proudly behind him. Its white tower glowed softly against the green hills. Far out at sea, the tiny sailboat he had noticed that morning was still visible. It had traveled only a little farther. Its white sail caught the golden light beautifully. Elias wondered where its quiet journey might end. Perhaps at another peaceful harbor. Perhaps beside another lonely lighthouse. He smiled. Some journeys were beautiful simply because they moved slowly. A gentle breeze carried the distant scent of the ocean, mixed with the fragrance of wild thyme growing between the rocks. Nearby, a family of rabbits appeared among the tall grass. They nibbled quietly on the clover. One little rabbit paused. Its ears twitched gently. It looked toward Elias for only a moment, then calmly returned to its evening meal. Nothing felt afraid here. The cliffs had become a place of trust. Above the sea, a flock of seabirds glided gracefully across the glowing sky. Their white wings reflected the warm colors of sunset. They hardly flapped at all. The wind carried them effortlessly. The sun slowly lowered toward the horizon. Golden light turned to soft amber. Amber became gentle shades of rose and lavender. The ocean reflected every changing color. The waves looked almost like flowing silk. Elias remained perfectly still. There was no need for words. Some sunsets were best enjoyed in complete silence. He closed his eyes for a moment. The cool breeze touched his face. The steady rhythm of the waves filled the quiet space around him. It felt almost like the sea was humming a peaceful lullaby. When he opened his eyes again, the first evening star had appeared above the horizon. Its tiny light shimmered softly against the deepening sky. Back at the lighthouse, the great lantern would soon need to shine once more. Elias stood slowly. He gave one last peaceful glance toward the endless sea, then followed the winding path home. Behind him, the sunset faded gently into twilight. Ahead, the warm light of the lighthouse was already waiting to welcome another quiet evening. Twilight settled gently over whispering cliffs. The bright colors of sunset slowly faded into soft shades of blue and violet. One by one, the first stars appeared above the quiet sea. The lighthouse stood peacefully against the evening sky. Its white stone walls now carried the gentle glow of approaching night. Elias returned to the lighthouse. The familiar wooden door closed softly behind him. Inside, the spiral staircase waited in quiet silence. He picked up a small brass lantern. Its warm golden flame flickered gently. Holding it carefully, he began climbing the winding staircase. Step after step, the stone walls echoed with the soft sound of his footsteps. The higher he climbed, the wider the evening view became. At last, he reached the lantern room. Tall glass windows surrounded him on every side. Beyond them, the sea stretched endlessly beneath the darkening sky. Elias carefully inspected each pane of glass. A thin layer of sea mist had settled during the afternoon. With a soft linen cloth, he polished every window until it shone like crystal. The last light of dusk reflected beautifully across the spotless glass. Everything was ready. In the center of the room, the great lighthouse lantern stood waiting. Its polished brass frame gleamed warmly. Elias checked the mechanism with calm, practiced hands. Every lever, every gear, every small detail. He had completed this same evening routine for many years. Yet he never hurried. A lighthouse deserved patience. It had one simple purpose: to offer light to those traveling through the night. As the sun disappeared completely beyond the horizon, Elias gently turned the great lantern. A warm beam of golden light awakened. Slowly, it began its steady circle across the sea. Round and round, without pause, without effort. Far below, the calm waves caught the light for only a moment, before darkness embraced them once again. Elias stood quietly beside the great window. Somewhere in the distance, a small sailing boat crossed the open water. Its tiny mast was barely visible beneath the stars. For a brief moment, the lighthouse beam passed over it. The little boat seemed to glow softly. Then it continued peacefully into the night. Elias smiled. Perhaps someone aboard had looked toward the cliffs and felt comforted by the familiar light. That quiet thought always warmed his heart. He poured himself a small cup of chamomile tea from the flask he had carried upstairs. The gentle aroma filled the lantern room. Holding the warm cup, he watched the stars slowly multiply above the sea. The moon rose quietly from the eastern horizon. Its silver reflection stretched across the calm water like a peaceful pathway. The lighthouse continued its silent work. The waves continued their endless song. And high above the cliffs, everything felt safe. Everything felt calm. Everything felt exactly where it belonged. The night grew deeper. The lighthouse continued its slow, steady rhythm. Its warm beam swept gracefully across the quiet sea, then disappeared into the darkness, only to return again a few moments later. Outside, the cliffs rested beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The wind had become softer now. It whispered gently through the tall coastal grasses. Their quiet rustling blended perfectly with the distant sound of the waves. Elias stepped out onto the narrow balcony that circled the top of the lighthouse. He carried only his warm cup of tea. The porcelain mug felt comforting in his hands. The cool night air brushed gently across his face. Far below, the sea looked almost like polished glass. Moonlight shimmered across its surface. Tiny silver ripples caught the light before quietly fading away. There was something magical about seeing the ocean at night. Not because it was mysterious, but because it felt wonderfully peaceful. Elias rested one hand on the smooth iron railing. From here, he could see almost everything. The winding path through the cliffs. The little stone cottage below. The quiet garden sleeping beneath the moonlight. Even the old wooden bench where he watched the sunset each evening. Everything looked softer beneath the stars. A shooting star crossed the sky. Only for a second. A quiet silver line. Then it was gone. Elias smiled gently. Some beautiful moments were never meant to last long. That was part of what made them so special. Nearby, a family of seabirds rested upon the white cliffs. Their wings were tucked close against the cool breeze. Even they seemed to understand the peaceful rhythm of the night. Elias took another slow sip of tea. The warmth spread gently through his hands. Somewhere far across the sea, a distant lighthouse answered with its own quiet beam. Its light appeared only for a moment, then vanished beyond the horizon. Elias always found comfort in knowing another keeper was awake somewhere in the darkness, quietly doing the same simple work, offering light, expecting nothing in return. The moon climbed a little higher. Its silver glow bathed the cliffs in soft light. The wild grasses shimmered like gentle waves. Even the old stone walls of the lighthouse seemed peaceful beneath its glow. After a while, Elias finished the last of his tea. He remained standing for just a few more moments, breathing slowly, listening carefully. The sea never truly became silent. It simply spoke more softly at night. Finally, he turned toward the lantern room once again. The great light continued its faithful circle, guiding unseen travelers across the sleeping ocean. And somewhere beyond the endless horizon, morning was already beginning its quiet journey toward whispering cliffs. The night had become wonderfully still. The lighthouse continued its quiet watch over the sea. Its gentle beam moved across the water with the same calm rhythm it had followed for countless years. Inside the lantern room, everything felt warm and peaceful. The polished brass lantern glowed softly. The great glass windows reflected tiny stars from the sky beyond. Elias stood quietly for a final moment. His evening work was complete. The lighthouse needed nothing more. It would continue shining faithfully until dawn. He picked up the small brass lantern. Its golden light illuminated the spiral staircase. With slow, careful steps, he began his journey back down. Each wooden step gave a familiar, gentle creak, a sound that had welcomed him home every night for many years. Outside, the sea breeze whispered around the white tower. Inside, the old stone walls held the comforting warmth of the day. When Elias reached the cottage, he opened the little wooden door. A cozy silence greeted him. The fireplace had become a bed of glowing embers. Soft orange light flickered gently across the room. He placed the lantern beside the window, then added one small piece of firewood to the hearth. For a moment, tiny sparks danced upward, then settled once again into peaceful warmth. Elias walked to the bookshelf. He carefully returned his weather journal to its familiar place. Tomorrow, it would hold another simple memory. Perhaps about the sea, perhaps about the birds, or perhaps only about the quiet beauty of an ordinary day. He smiled. Ordinary days often became the most precious memories. Before climbing the stairs, he stepped outside one last time. The cliffs rested peacefully beneath the moon. The lighthouse behind him continued turning slowly. Its warm beam crossed the sleeping sea. Far below, the waves touched the shore with quiet patience. Again, and again, just as they always had. Elias closed his eyes. He took one slow breath. The cool sea air filled his lungs. It carried the scent of salt, wild grass, and the endless ocean. Everything felt calm. Everything felt complete. With a grateful heart, he whispered a quiet thank you for another peaceful day. Then he returned inside. Upstairs, the little bedroom waited beneath the sloping roof. Moonlight slipped gently through the curtains. Silver light rested across the wooden floor. Elias placed his cardigan neatly over the chair, hung his old lighthouse keys beside the door, then settled beneath a warm wool blanket. Outside, the stars continued their silent journey across the sky. The lighthouse remained awake. The sea continued its endless lullaby. The cliffs stood strong and peaceful beneath the moonlight. Within moments, Elias' breathing became slow, steady, peaceful, and perhaps, as you imagine the gentle waves, the cool sea breeze, and the warm light of the lighthouse guiding the quiet night, you, too, can let your thoughts drift away. May the calm of whispering cliffs stay with you. May your heart feel light. May your mind grow wonderfully still. And may sleep arrive as gently as the tide meeting the shore. Thank you for spending this peaceful evening at the lighthouse. Until our next gentle journey. Sleep well. Good night.